She wanted to make some public comment.
You're live.
Thank you, Christina. Welcome, everybody, to the City Council meeting, February the 10th, 2020. Excuse me, Madam Clerk.
Prior to roll call, the city attorney would like to make an announcement regarding the teleconferencing procedures of the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have adopted procedures for this meeting that meet or exceed the standards that are set forth in Governor Newsom's Order Number N-25-20, allowing for public meetings like this one to be held by teleconference in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Please conduct the roll call at this point, and I'll ask the mayor to recognize me afterward to ask the questions 3 about the confirmation of the council members. Thank you.
Councilmember Hudson?
Here.
Councilmember Alone?
Here.
Councilmember Perkins?
Here.
Vice Mayor Zafar?
Here.
And Mayor Clarkson?
Here,
Thank you.
Martin, it's back to you.
Thank you. I'd now like to verify that all members of the council can hear me well. All members of the council have been able to hear all previous speakers, including the roll call, and that each council member believes, based on facial or voice recognition, that all who are representing themselves to be council members are council members. See.
Dave, thumbs up?
Yes.
Confirmation.
Okay.
I will turn it back over to the mayor with the reminder that all votes taken during this meeting must be done by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to look for a volunteer. This is my second to last meeting. I'll do the pledge at the last meeting, but I'm looking for a volunteer who'd like to lead us in the pledge. And Sabina, our vice mayor, has done so. So.
I taught you better than that.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America
and to the
to the
republic
republic for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Madam Clerk.
Item 3, announcements. 3.1, changes and additions to the agenda. We have none. Item 3.2, if you'd like to speak under public comment or any item on the agenda, please click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak. Item 3.3, board, committee, and commission meetings. A full list of our upcoming meetings can be found on the city's website, and you can subscribe to those pages for automatic notification. Item 4, public comment.
Public comment is an opportunity for anybody from the public to address the council on any item that's not on the agenda. All we ask is that you keep your comments for 3 minutes or less, and that Christina will walk you through the process if you want to talk.
For those in the audience, I would like to speak under public comment. Please use the raise your hand button at this time or *9 on your telephone. I do have one request to speak under this item. And it appears we don't have any hands raised.
And no written?
Yes, I have one written comment, and I'll go ahead and read that now.
Thank you.
The written comment is from Chris Huff. In regards to city-funded large infrastructure projects or developments in San Ramon, street repavement, bridge construction, or mass residential, what is being done to ensure that local San Ramon businesses are being utilized on these projects in San Ramon where they live, lease, and employ residents? We have engineers, contractors, developers, and vendors residing in San Ramon, and these should be utilized on these large projects. Many cities work with developers and within their own bid documents on city projects to ensure this participation by contractors form outside the city by mandating it within the project requirements. Please ensure that San Ramon will work with outside contractors to perform good faith efforts to utilize local participation. If we continue to hire contractors paying low rent in other cities to work in San Ramon, you will lose businesses that are not directly tied to residential services, food, or entertainment. And that was the only public comment I have for item 4.
All right, I will close the public comment. Next item.
Item 5, consent calendar.
Items on the consent calendar are deemed routine in nature, but anybody from the audience or a staff member or of course, a council person can ask for an item to be pulled for further discussion. Is there a motion?
I'll move 5.1 through 5.9.
Second.
It's been moved by Perkins, seconded by Hudson. Discussion. Seeing no hand raised, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Hudson,
Aye.
Councilmember Alone,
Aye.
Councilmember Perkins,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zafar,
Aye.
and Mayor Clarkson.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0. Item 6, special presentations, we have none. Item 7, deferred consent items, we also have none. Item 8, adoption of ordinances, we have none. Item 9, city council appointments, there are none this evening. Item 10, approval of minutes. Before you are the minutes from the city council regular meeting from October 27th, 2020 for your approval or amendment.
Move approval October 27th.
Second.
It's up to you, Christina, who got that second.
I have Councilmember Alone as the second.
Thank
Oh,
you.
his favorite, Jiminy.
All,
I think we need to go double overtime.
seeing no further comments, Madam Clerk.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudson,
Aye again.
Councilmember Alone.
Aye.
Councilmember Perkins,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zafar,
Aye.
and Mayor Clarkson.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0. Item 11, unfinished business. 11.1, continue public hearing, introduction of revised ordinance to update the Crow Canyon specific plan update, SPA 20-800-001 and IS 20-250-001. Staff report by Lauren Barr, Planning Services Division Manager.
Good
Hello,
evening.
Lauren.
Good evening. How are you all? Thank you for working through this process with us. Could we promote Andrew Hill into the meeting? So tonight we have a revised proposal for introduction. At the last meeting, we got direction to modify the ordinance introduction and resolution in response to a decision to reinstate the housing overlay for the Crow Canyon specific plan area. And that necessitated a change to the proposed ordinance itself and some additional analysis by our contract staff. So at this point, I'd like to share my screen and have Andrew Hill go ahead and run through the presentation, and then we'll be available for questions afterwards. So if I can share my screen here. And if you could please let me know that you can see it.
We see it.
Okay, Andrew, it's all you.
Great, thank you. If you could advance to the next slide, Lauren, please. Thank you. So as Lauren said, based on council direction, the public review draft of the Crow Canyon specific plan has been updated. And next slide, please, Lauren. And so the purpose of the hearing tonight is to introduce a revised ordinance for updating the Crow Canyon specific plan. This is the first of a two-step process, and to hear any additional comments regarding the public review draft of the plan tonight. Next slide, please. Recapping the process to date, as you all know, the draft Crow Canyon specific plan was released for public review in May of this year. The Planning Commission held a total of 5 hearings in order to receive public comment, and ultimately they approved Resolution 1220 recommending approval of the Crow Canyon specific plan update and the addendum to the 2006 CIR. Subsequent to that, the City Council held 3 hearings to receive public comment and to discuss the draft Crow Canyon specific plan. Those hearings were held on September 22nd, October 13th, and October 27th. Next slide, please. At your most recent hearing on the 27th, the City Council directed staff to revise the public review draft in order to restore the residential capacity of the plan area back to 735 units and to introduce a revised ordinance at tonight's meeting. Accordingly, the public review draft has been updated using track changes to show an addition, the restoration of 735 residential units by returning the residential overlay to the area north of Faria Preserve Parkway. Additionally, a supplemental memorandum has been prepared to evaluate the potential environmental impacts of introducing the residential overlay, and the conclusion of that analysis was that re-implementation would not result in any new or substantially more severe impacts over what had previously been analyzed. Next slide, please, Lauren. These maps are showing the location to which the residential overlay has been restored, as you can see in the northwestern portion of the plan area, north of Faria Preserve Parkway. Additionally, the public review draft has been revised to incorporate the residential overlay land use description, as well as development standards, design guidelines, and applicable objective standards. Next slide, please. In order for the Crow Canyon specific plan to have regulatory authority, it needs to be adopted by ordinance. Once adopted, it will serve as the zoning for the Crow Canyon specific plan area, except in cases where the plan is silent, in which case the zoning ordinance will govern. The zoning map will be updated to reflect the boundary change, which includes the addition of the Ryan Industrial Court area in the southwest. And so on the basis of all this, the recommended action tonight is to introduce the revised ordinance, read it by title only, and then to continue the public hearing until November 24th, and refer the draft revisions or the revisions to the public review draft to the Planning Commission for report and recommendation on November 17th. And then finally to set November 24th as the date for council adoption of the ordinance. Next slide, please. And so if council is amenable to that recommendation, the next steps would be referral to the Planning Commission for report and recommendation next Tuesday, the 17th of November. And then subsequent to that, a council hearing, the fifth one, on November 24th. And that date would be set as the date for ordinance and EIR addendum adoption. So that ends a quick presentation. We'll open it up for any questions or comments.
You muted,
Dave,
go.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Go ahead, Dave.
I want to be clear. I'm seeing in the recommendation that we're being asked to introduce an ordinance next in line, amending the city zoning map to expand the Crow Canyon. You can read it as well as I, and resolution number 2020 next in line. Are you asking for both, or would you, is it the question is after public comment, we also include that, or how did that get in there? Is that also part of a motion you're looking for, staff?
Well, we have the resolution to also adopt the addendum. And so we'll need to come back with the resolution at the same time as the ordinance.
Okay, so you're not looking for the action of moving resolution number 2020 next in line. You just want the introduction of the ordinance. Okay. You want the introduction of the revised ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. I'll move the introduction of the ordinance next in line, amending the city zoning map to expand the Crow Canyon specific land boundary area and adopting development standards and zoning regulations, and waive the reading.
Is there a second?
It's not muted.
I see Perkins seconded. Is that
I'll second.
all right? This would be an appropriate time with no further questions to open the public comment. Christina, could you ask people if they'd like to participate and comment?
For those in the audience that would like to speak on this item, please use the raise your hand button or *9 on your telephone at this time. I do not have any written comment for this item, but I do have, it appears, 2 hands raised right now. So we'll go with Brian Winter first.
Hello, Brian.
Can you all hear me?
Barely.
Okay, sorry, bad connection. I'll do my best here. Good evening. Thank you again. I'll be brief. I want to commend the staff for its responsiveness in responding to feedback from members of the public concerned about the density of the Crow Canyon specific plan area and ensuring that the residential density in that area is maintained. In addition, I wanted to briefly note, and we sent a short letter in today's record, but we would just want to make sure that on the council's radar is our desire to discuss in a study session involving either the council alone or in a joint study session involving the Planning Commission and the City Council, discussing density options for my client's potential redevelopment of the property at 2701 Hooper Drive. We believe there are some density options that would warrant especially council feedback, and we would welcome an opportunity to discuss those issues with the council. That's all I have for tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you again, and kudos to staff.
Thank you, Brian.
The next public comment is from Jim Blickenstaff.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, Jim Blickenstaff again. I wanted to reiterate my concerns from last time that parks are not being addressed fully here. I don't believe the council or the planning commission even talked about the issue at the last meeting. And it's still a significant issue because, as I mentioned earlier, a creek corridor is not a park. It's going to be protected green space independent of park needs. So using the creek corridor as the basis of your park, it doesn't really solve the issue. And when you look at park needs, it looks like even before we increase the numbers of the units, we're already deficient by 9 acres. So I'd like the city to tackle this issue. It directly relates to the quality of life of the residents. And I think it's a very important thing to maintain that standard that we have in our general plan as we go along, rather than getting further behind the curve. So I'd like the city to look at that and actually start to address it in a manner that prioritizes it to the same extent you're prioritizing SB 330, for example, because it's a direct effect on the citizens. And I think we need to keep parks up with the amount of people we're adding so we don't have that impact on their quality of life. So if we add, I believe it was said 109 more units that go back to an older plan, that also exacerbates the park issues by another 1.7 acres. So again, the actions on this Crow Canyon specific plan are bearing on our park needs directly. And when you add it all up, there's as many as 10 acres that have not been put into the plan to compensate for the increase in the population. We really need to look at that and get that taken care of, however you feel you have to do it. But I think it's important to address that and show the citizens that you're responding to the needs for parks and actually tackling that issue head on. So, and you still have a little time to do this. I think there's no rush to final approval. I know you have interested developers and landowners that are looking for extra density bonuses and more units, but that doesn't really address the larger picture as if this will benefit the community. The 17% increase in population from the 109 units means there are going to be more impacts. CEQA should be engaged again to make sure you're not messing with the plan you already have in place, because it sounds like that's very likely to happen with an overlay that changes your original design, which was more of a village design than this will end up being with the amount of units you're trying to put in. So I think we have to cover the CEQA rules, but especially the park aspects of that, so we don't get further behind the curve on our parks. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Madam Clerk, any more hands raised?
That was the last hand raised for this item.
Okay, I will close the public comment. Any further discussion on this, Dave?
Yeah, I think we need a point of clarification when we start hearing things like 109 units. That's different than, and I'm sorry, I can't print anything in this room, Christina. But there's a letter there, staff, I'd like a response that the question was that I read was whether or not 43 units should, or 46 or something like that should go on there that would be multifamily or townhouse versus 36 single family. That's a lot different than 109. I mean, so I guess at least a clarification of what's the presentation that Mr. Winter was talking about.
Okay.
And that's a letter we received today.
Okay. I haven't seen the letter, but there's a mixing of some different issues here.
Yes.
Mr. Winter is representing his client and has a pre-application proposal for a townhome project on the Golden Skate site. That is totally separate, and he's pursuing that application under the existing standards that are in place under the 2006 plan. He's vested those rights with the filing of the application. The addition of the residential overlay restores the total unit count back to what it was from 2006, to 735 units. And so from a baseline standpoint, it doesn't change anything beyond what was today or what was previously analyzed in the EIR. Likewise, parks are looked at from the standpoint of the community as a whole, the 6.5 acres per thousand residents. And so the park sites that are identified in the specific plan are part of the general plan analysis that shows compliance with that standard. The creek corridors are not considered as part of that, only the creeks that are part of a larger park site. So I think that will touch on some of the issues. If there are additional questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you.
Great. Any more questions?
So when can we, and what's the process for renaming this to San Ramon Village Plan? I think we discussed that a few meetings ago. Do we want to?
Just a matter of adopting the plan.
Okay. And then we rename it?
As part of it, you're making that action.
Should be a last act by someone that's to be renamed or remain nameless.
I see no further.
So we're basically returning to where it was, but we're also handing this off to the planning commission to
Yes.
take a pass at it. Okay.
You were going to say something, Lauren.
I was going to say, just in the sense of the unit count, there's still lots of other things that are part of the update, the objective standards, the reconfiguration of some of the sites. So it's not a step backwards in its entirety. It's just accommodating the additional units.
Thank you, Lauren. See no further comments, and looking to Martin that we're okay, I believe we can go to the city clerk for a vote.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hudson,
Aye. This is
Councilmember
on the
Malone,
introduction, right?
Yes, this would be the motion on the introduction.
Yeah, because I haven't done the refer, right? Aye.
Councilmember Alone,
Aye.
Councilmember Perkins,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zafar,
Aye.
Mayor Clarkson.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0.
Did you want to say something, Dave?
We've gone through the public hearing. I just would move that we refer the revisions to the public review draft to the Planning Commission for report and recommendation on November 17th, and then continue the public hearing to November 24th for additional public comment.
Is there a second?
Aye.
Perkins seconded. Lauren, you good with that process?
Sounds perfect.
Good, thank you. Want to make sure.
What if we
Any
vote
other-
2-3? What?
Any other comments? See no further hands being raised, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Hudson,
Aye.
Councilmember Alone,
Aye.
Councilmember Perkins,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zafar,
Aye.
and Mayor Clarkson.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you,
Thank you.
Andrew. Madam Clerk.
Item 12, new business, 12.1, Resolution 2020-109, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Contra Costa Transportation Authority for financing the construction of the Bollinger Canyon Road / Iron Horse Trail Bicycle Pedestrian Overcrossing Project in an amount not to exceed $9.2 million, appropriating the proceeds from this financing agreement to CIP 905530 and reappropriating the CIP 905530 $1 million general fund portion to the Pavement Management Project 2021 and 3.601 from 2019 Certificate of Participation Debt Financing portion to Pavement Management Project 2022. Staff report by Robin Bartlett, Engineering Services Division Manager.
Hey, Robin.
Dina. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
So the item before you is related to the financing of the Bollinger Canyon Iron Horse Trail overcrossing and pavement management. But I would like to take this opportunity, if I may, to give you a update on the Iron Horse Trail overcrossing. It's been quite a while since I did that. So with that, if I can share my screen, I will start a presentation. All right. So first thing I'd like to remind you of is that this project is being delivered under the CMGC delivery method. And what that stands for is the construction manager, general contractor delivery method. And under that method, the designer is selected in a traditional qualifications-based manner. But then the general contractor is also selected on a qualifications basis, and the general contractor works as a construction manager in conjunction with the designer to make sure that construction issues are fully brought to bear during the design process. So that minimizes the potential for change orders, provides for greater cost certainty, and minimizes delays that can often occur during projects. So to date, the designer has been selected, and the designer is Cowie. Cowie is an international firm. They're headquartered in Denmark, but this design is being undertaken in their Oakland office. They've literally designed thousands of bridges. So they're well-versed in doing not only this type of structure, but working with CMGC and other alternative delivery methods.
Did they do the Sundial Bridge on the Sacramento River?
They worked on the Sundial Bridge in reanalyzing the design and determining how it could actually be constructed, and basically redesigning it to make it constructible and to figure out the structural needs during actual fabrication of the elements.
That's a fabulous bridge. Iconic.
That is a great project. At this point, the contractor has also been selected. The contractor is Myers & Sons, who is also teamed up with Shimmick. Both of those are Northern California contractors, and they have a great deal of experience with CMGC, alternative delivery, innovating on projects, and they have also completed a number of cable stay bridges. That includes the large Gerald Desmond Bridge at Long Beach, the Warm Springs BART access bridge, and the recently completed bus terminal bridge in San Francisco. So as you may recall, the concept that we talked about quite a few months ago now was to have a cable stay bridge with a single pylon located near the median. And the concept included kind of a split pylon to provide the structural element. So Cowie has been continuing with that concept, and they've come up with a few renderings on various alternatives. All of these are subject to further analysis and subject to consultations with the contractor to help determine what elements are most cost effective and where we should prioritize spending our funds. But this is one concept they've come up with that includes some bends, which provide some really interesting visuals to the project.
By the way, interestingly enough, that also strengthens it. Putting
Yes.
in the bends.
And this is another concept, literally a more straightforward alignment, just runs straight along the Iron Horse Trail, but otherwise quite similar. That one is a lot easier to imagine. So I'll show you a few of their renderings of what a curved bridge might look like. Again, this is just to give a general idea of appearances of the structure itself. Of course, the surrounding elements will be different, but this would give you a sense of what the curvature would look like if we can make it work. This is just a detail. This is Cowie's rendering to show various concepts. There's things that probably will not happen shown in this rendering, such as, of course, the at-grade crossing won't exist. And probably a variety of other elements will end up being modified as we go, but it speaks to various things that are being looked at. For example, where would landscaping occur? How far back can the abutments and retaining structures be relative to the main span? Issues that are being examined include the use of steel versus concrete for the main support and also for the decks. In the background, you can see a ramp down. That's one concept that's being looked at. Can we avoid stairs and have a perhaps more interesting looking structure by having the access to Bollinger Canyon actually include a partial ramp up and a partial ramp down while the path bifurcates and the main path continues over the bridge.
So that's good for bicycles, right? Certainly allows them, or do we have provisions even with the stairs for the bikers?
Yes, if you don't have the stairs down from the bridge, then you have to continue a fully at-grade path to get to Bollinger Canyon Road, because we can't cut off travel and we don't want to eliminate an ADA path.
Yeah.
So some way or another, there needs to be a continuation of the trail or a path to the Bollinger Canyon Road. Just to give you a sense of some of the challenges that we have to deal with on the project, I've outlined in gray the curved option of the bridge. And these items that show up in pink are some of the utilities that exist in the site. So heading from the south to the north is Central Sands 24-inch sanitary sewer force main. So that's pressurized sewer line that's headed out to Martinez. So we're looking to avoid that. And there is what's referred to here as level 3 underground conduit. That's fiber optic line. Also heading along the Iron Horse Trail. There is also PG&E distribution lines and another fiber optic line on Bollinger Canyon Road. So no matter what the alignment is, there's challenges to deal with utilities. We have to also be concerned about how the bridge itself and the approach ramps interface with the property lines. If, for example, we had a straight line here, we'd be worried about how it interacted with the force main. We can't put new loads on that force main, so we're working with Central Sand to figure out exactly what can be done while trying to avoid relocation of the force main if we can. If we go with curvature, then in some areas we may get closer to the property line, and so we'd have to figure out, well, do we have a structural span here rather than a vertical retaining wall? How exactly might things like the at-grade continuations of Iron Horse Trail interface with everything else that's going in there? So these are things that are being considered. And yes.
Kinder Morgan, doesn't it have an easement through there too?
Yes, but Kinder Morgan is somewhere over here.
Thank you.
So we don't expect Kinder Morgan to be an issue. There are many other concerns out there, including riparian habitat and trees and things like that, that all need to be taken into account. So now that the contractor's on board, we are hoping that discussions will start up that engage the contractor and allow us to start resolving some of these problems. So to move into the financial issues, what we're looking for here is a $9.2 million financing agreement with Contra Costa Transportation Authority. This will be a no interest financing agreement. So it's essentially a no interest loan that would be paid back by the Measure J return to source funds over a 9-year period. That funding would be for both the Iron Horse Trail overcrossing as well as for a surge in preventative maintenance funding for PMP. And in that instance, it's really in lieu of the trip financing that we've been thinking of in the past. So focusing on the bridge element, what's shown in this table is a comparison of what our original financing was anticipating for this project with a bottom line of $20.8 million. That included $4.989 million from the Measure J TLC future year pre-commitment. And it also includes $4.8 million in a federal grant, which is the OBAG 2. So what's happened with the slowdown in the economy is that the Measure J TLC future year commitment cannot be relied upon. In fact, it is likely to not happen. That would create approximately $5 million hole in this project's budget and risk delays. Of course, this project has already been approximately 10 years in the planning and development. It's proceeded now to the hiring of a designer. So we don't want to lose the investment that's gone in, nor do we want to put at risk that federal funding. So in order to overcome this, this is where CCTA has suggested that we can use this STIP funding. The STIP funding is transportation improvement funds that CCTA has control over that had been earmarked for another project. And that project is unable to move forward at this time. So they're able to make this funding available to us subject to repayment. So that would allow the project to move forward. All of the funding would need to go towards the overcrossing in order to meet the requirements of the STIP funds. But of course, that would liberate some other funding that is currently committed for the bridge, which includes the funding from the certificate of participation, as well as about $1 million of general funds. Now, of course, simultaneously, we've been looking at using this TRIP funding mechanism, which is, again, a loan that is based also off of the Measure J return to source funds. And the idea here was to have this surge in funding that I'd mentioned, which is focused on doing preventative maintenance. So that goes back to the strategy that we use for pavement management. And the strategy that we've adopted is what we refer to as a critical point approach. And the idea of the critical point is that we determine the condition of the pavement and what treatment would be required to bring that pavement back up to the best reasonable condition we can get. We then hold off on doing that treatment until the last bit of benefit has really gotten out of the pavement in its current condition. And just before it requires the next most expensive treatment. So the idea is really to get the most out of the life of the existing pavement while using the cheapest possible improvement method for that pavement. And this gives us the greatest benefit for the dollar when we're maintaining our streets. So if you apply that methodology to City of San Ramon streets, we find that there's a lot of streets that are just approaching the point where they need some preventative maintenance. And that's preventative maintenance I'm referring to is the relatively low cost slurry seals and microsurfacing that we really use as the first treatment on a now aging but relatively new and relatively good street. So because the Doherty Valley was developed relatively quickly, we've had a lot of those streets reaching that point where they need a slurry seal. Last year, we treated a very large number of streets in the Doherty Valley, and we're projecting to do that again. So we developed a 5-year plan, which assumed that we would have approximately $4 million in TRIP funding, and that would allow us to do a great deal of preventative maintenance in the Doherty Valley, as well as in a few other areas, and really get the most benefit for our dollar and allow us to really pave a lot of streets very quickly and bring in this preventative maintenance that keeps the streets good in the first place. Now, unfortunately, the TRIP financing has really become not a very good option. It requires the CCTA to adjust their ordinance for spending Measure J funds. And they're very sensitive about that, understandably so, because they want to make sure that the any expenditure of the funds is fully consistent with the voter-approved Measure J in the first place. It's very important that they maintain all of their credibility with the voters. So even though this is spending Measure J funds as intended, they're very cautious about that. But again, CCTA came forward with this idea that we can have from the $9.2 million in STIP funding enough money to really accomplish both of our goals of financing the bridge as well as financing this surge in pavement management. So focusing still on the pavement management, really what we have is that our existing pavement is in good condition. The existing 5-year plan already accounted for us taking a large TRIP loan. And so this isn't really a major adjustment to that pavement management plan. However, because the payback period for the STIP is 9 years instead of 14 years, we will have to do some adjustments because this will mean that the Measure J return to source will be completely committed to paying back the STIP loan over the next 9 years rather than spreading it out over 14 years. However, again, we have no interest payments, no financing charges, so it's a pretty good deal from that perspective. Again, as I mentioned, the STIP trip, either one would reduce funds available for PMP. So we are facing a long-term decline in the condition of our streets. And this will, of course, exacerbate that a little bit. But the surge in funding will itself have a substantial payback. So I estimate that the $4 to $4.6 million that we invest will yield a payback of not just the 4.6, but an additional $1 to $1.5 million by allowing us to catch streets that are in that point before they've reached that critical point inflection where they've now required the next most expensive treatment. So by using the preventative maintenance now, we'll save ourselves from having to do a more expensive overlay later. And so with all of these changes, of course, we'll have to reevaluate our 5-year pavement management plan, which we'll bring back to the infrastructure committee early next year. So just in brief summary, the money from the STIP contribution to PMP will have a payback of about 20 to 25% return on investment. The STIP loan is a little bit better deal than the trip that we were contemplating, as there's no fees and no interest. Our pavement is still in good condition. We have a PCI of 78. And so there is still time to consider how we will deal with the long-term funding. And of course, the bridge is a long-term investment, so this will avoid any delays and any increased costs that are associated with those delays. So with that, do you have any questions for me?
Scott?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about taking money out of our PMP to pay for this, as I'm sure you are. And I hope we can address this possibly at mid-year after we look and see how our income is doing, how our reserves are doing, how our expenses are doing, and what it means to our pavement condition index going forward. That maybe a small contribution from the general fund now might help us in the long term. If you're showing a 125% return or 150% return, it might be worthwhile to take some of our reserves and push them into pavement management. But that's a discussion for early next year, and hopefully staff will consider those things. We're looking at our revenues and expenses.
Before we go to public comment, any more questions for Robin? Not seeing any. Christina, could you see if anybody would like to speak on this issue?
For those in the audience that would like to speak on this item, please use the raise your hand button at this time or *9 on your telephone.
And we will give them a couple of seconds here to do so.
I do have one written comment for this item, if you would like to go to that first.
Let's go ahead and do that first.
So the written comment is from Chris Beasley. I like to support this project as I'm a resident and cyclist. I also request that the traffic controls along Bollinger be upgraded at the same time to include vehicle sensing. It seems that the current lights are just based on timers, resulting in many vehicles sitting when there's no cross traffic and drivers accelerating rapidly to speeds well in excess of the speed limit to try to make the next light. It is very inefficient and dangerous stretch of road and surprising to see in such a modern and otherwise well-planned city. That was the only written request, the written public comment, and it appears we do not have any hand raised.
And I will close the public comment. and go back to my council members for any questions or comments and to
I'll move
receive this report.
2020-109.
Dave, speak up.
I'll move 2020-109.
I'll second.
Moved, Hudson, seconded by Perkins. Any other questions? Sabina?
So, Robin, thank you so much. I really like how you've kind of brought back the financing on this one. I know there's some concern on the PMP. Hopefully we can look at that next year and see how we mitigate that. But overall, I think, you know, in the times that we're in and with everything happening, to be able to bring this back to us and make this whole, and the city not putting in as much directly towards this, I really appreciate that. So I wanted to say thank you for making sure this is on target. I know there's a lot of people looking forward to it, making comments that they've been waiting for 10 years and they might wait for another 10 years. So hopefully nobody's going to be waiting for this for another 10 years. So thank you.
Voted on
Thank
Jay.
you.
Phil?
Just design to actual, you know, shovel in the ground. What's your guess, Robin?
The design will take about a year. So we're looking for the beginning of construction a little over a year from now, meaning if we are able to go seamlessly with this CMGC method, we already have the contractor on board. So long as the contractor's cost to do the work is within reason, we would even eliminate a bidding process. Of course, if it's not, we have the option of going out to bid. So that means that they should be able to hit the ground running fairly quickly once the design is complete.
2-year project after that?
Yeah, it's a good 2 years.
Okay. And
Sorry.
it's somebody who will have no say in this in the future. The curve is certainly a really nice element, and hope they can make it work. We'll see. Thank you.
Scott?
Robin, is it possible that by using this contracting construction method, that the contractor can purchase long lead items before the design is complete?
I'd have to discuss that in some detail with CCTA, but yes, I think that is the case, that we can move things around as appropriate. The problem is you need to make sure that their final cost estimate is the one you want to go with. On the other hand, there are some other things that we are moving around. For example, potholing for utilities will likely be moved out of construction and put into the design phase.
Good, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Hudson,
Aye.
Councilmember Alone,
Aye.
Councilmember Perkins,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zafar,
Aye.
and Mayor Clarkson.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Robin.
Item 12.2, resolution number 2020-110, approving library service level change for January 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2021. Presented by Brad Morris, Program Manager, Allison McKee, County Librarian, and Nancy Kreiser, Deputy County Librarian.
Good evening, Mayor Clarkson and City Council members. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. I'm going to share my screen right now, so if you can give me a minute. Just confirming everybody can see the slide. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here tonight to present to you an update on our library services in San Ramon. Before I get started, I would like to introduce Allison McKay, who is on the call, our interim county librarian, as well as Nancy Kreiser, the deputy county librarian. They'll be here for after the presentation to answer any questions you might have from a county perspective. Also, Dina Hollywood, our San Ramon librarian, is in attendance as well. The recommended action is the Parks and Community Services Commission and staff recommend that the City Council approve the proposed library service levels changes for January 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2021. I know you're all aware of the history, but just real quick to go through the history. The San Ramon Library, our first library use and maintenance agreement with the county, dates all the way back to October 1989. A new agreement was established in August 2005, and the current lease agreement that we're currently under was approved in January 2011 that is amended every year with updates. On the Doherty Station Library, we're currently operating under that the original MOU that was dated back in June 26, 2007, when that library came on board. Just to kind of go over with you the in-person services we have at those libraries, the San Ramon Library and Doherty Station Library. We have study rooms that are available to the community. The San Ramon Library has a laptop station with 6 laptops, while the Doherty Station Library has a computer lab. They both have community rooms that can be used by the community, as well as story time, adult and teen services. And then, of course, at the Doherty Station Library, we have access to the community college's reserves. And at the San Ramon Library, we have our wonderful Library Foundation bookstore, as well as the extensive jazz collection that the community can access from that library. Our operation hours in the past, at least last year in 2019-20, the San Ramon Library, we were operating with 58 total operating hours, which the model was, basically Monday through Thursday from 10 to 8, Fridays and Saturdays from 10 to 5, and then those Sunday hours from 1 to 5. And then at the Doherty Station Library, we were under a model that was Monday through Saturdays with various start times for a total of 50 operating hours at the Doherty Station Library. And this slide is just to kind of help you with those contributions that help offset those costs for those operating hours. It shows the Doherty Station, the community college's contribution. Annually, they contribute about $100,000 a year to offset those staffing needs, as well as the hours for the additional hours. And then the city's contribution. And this slide gives you a little bit better idea of those exact dollar amounts. Here it shows the 17 and 18 actuals, the 18-19 actuals. And then I chose to take what was budgeted for 19-20 because unfortunately that last quarter of 19-20, we were in COVID and those library services looked a lot different than they would in previous years. So those numbers wouldn't, I think, pertain to this conversation. And as you can see, you have the community college contribution and then our annual amounts that we've been contributing. And then just as a reminder, the city also covers the cost for the facility maintenance and utilities for both of those facilities. So in this past year, we were given notice from the community college that they were no longer interested in participating in the partnership moving forward. Through a bond, they were able to build a library closer to their campus. With that, that is great news. There's pluses and minuses to that. The minus is they're no longer interested in partnering with the county and the city in regards to those services at the Doherty Station Library. So the $100,000 would go away. However, the community now has a third library that they'll be able to access. So it creates a great opportunity for the community. With that, here you can see all those services that they'll be providing, a lot like the services we have in our other 2 libraries. With the exception of there's a little bit different with the collection, the book collection. It'll be much smaller than what we see in our traditional library, but I think that's meeting the needs more of those students and the faculty that will be doing much more stuff online and those type of services. And those hours of operation will really focus on when the majority of the student body is on campus, kind of an 8:30 to 5 model Monday through Thursday, and then a 9 to 1 on Friday. And those hours are subject to change depending on when we get back out of this COVID and the students return to in-person learning, what those needs will be, but those are the hours that they're looking to currently move forward with. And not that it's part of the library services, but they're also building a cafe and a learnings commons that will be right off of this, that the community will have access as well, or will have access to as well, which we think they're going to get, really appreciate and take advantage of. So with these changes taking place, we thought it was a great time for the city and the county to look at our services and how could we improve some of our services and change maybe some of our models now that we have the third library coming on board with those 38 hours. And so the proposed hours moving it forward are really at San Ramon. The reduction of hours on Sunday, the county is no longer providing hours on Sunday throughout the county. So we'll see that loss in hours. And then at the Doherty Station Library, looking at going to a 5-day-a-week model from Tuesday through Saturday. And with this, it provides us the opportunity to open up earlier on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, as well as provide a more robust offering on Saturdays. We really feel that the community really takes advantage of our library services on the weekends. We get huge numbers on Saturdays and what was Sundays. And so we think by going to this 5-day-a-week model, we'll be able to provide better services on Saturdays for those working parents and for those people that want those services on Saturdays, like story times, more programming. With the 5-day-a-week model, the full-time staff would be able to be there to provide those services. Compared to before, it would be a hybrid of part-time and full-time on Saturdays. So you're not able to get those services on the weekends. And so that Doherty Station Library hours would be at 44 operational hours. So we took this plan both to the Library Advisory Committee and the Parks and Community Services. Of course, the Library Advisory Committee, who are big proponents for the library, they were, disappointed to lose a possible day on Mondays. However, really the majority supported the proposal, and we're really happy about the additional services on Saturdays and what that could do for the community overall, not only the people that visit the Doherty Station Library, but even those San Ramon people that would be looking for those services. And then the Parks and Community Commission provided feedback and approved the recommendation unanimously. They, however, would like us to continue to evaluate the partnership that we have with the community college and how the community is using that library, as well as if the community is missing those services on Mondays, and evaluate the plan as we evaluate the budget cycle. So at the annual budget, continue to be evaluating our services, And then also to continue to work on those solutions for those Monday hours, if and when the San Ramon Valley Unified School District returns to in-person look and learning, really working with the community colleges on will that cafe be open and that common learning center, because we really think that those students are going to take advantage of those things, as well as, look at our current resources at the Doherty Station Community Center. But really, that's yet to be seen when the school district will be coming back, what that will look like, how many students, and if those students will even be looking for those services with COVID and everything else going on, and how can we meet that need. And so with that, the recommended plan is the county is continuing to provide those standard 35 hours a week at both of our libraries, the San Ramon and the Doherty Station Library. The community college library will be providing 38 additional hours of service. The city will cover the 19 additional hours at the San Ramon Library for a total of 54 hours. And then the city will be covering the 9 additional hours at the Doherty Station Library for a total of 44 hours. And that total cost is not to exceed the $376,110 that we currently have in the budget. So what we're proposing is currently covered within our operating budget that we had proposed. And so with that, I would love to turn it over to any questions that you might have. And as I mentioned, we have the county librarian on if there's any county questions that they can help with. So I please, more than happy to
Great.
answer any questions.
Sabina, you've got a question.
Yeah, I am not at all happy with the Monday not offering a day. Having kids that have gone and then used the library extensively, I know how important it is, especially for the middle schoolers, to go and study there in groups and things like that. So it's a huge resource to the middle schoolers. And I know San Ramon Valley Unified is looking at an opening plan starting January, whereas the community college has said that they won't be coming back in person for spring either. So that's at least based on what's happening right now. I don't know if it means we create some sort of a partnership with San Ramon Valley Unified District because we are a resource to the schools there. The kids do use the library and use especially the rooms and everything. And I understand with COVID, we're not sure, but I don't want this something that we approve now and then it becomes the norm. And that Monday is very important for the students. So I would love to see how we can find a way to bring back the Monday hours. That would be my recommendation right now, Brad.
Scott.
Sabina, the Monday hours you're most concerned about, I assume, are after 2 o'clock. Is that correct?
2:45, 3 o'clock.
Yeah, sometimes starting 2 o'clock-ish till 5 or something like that.
Yeah.
So you're hoping to get another 3 hours. Now I know that's awkward for the county librarian, but that's the piece you're most concerned with. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. I just want to know, is it the whole Monday thing, or is it just that part where the kids are out of middle school and mom and dad haven't picked them up and the house is dark and empty?
Yeah, and even if mom and dad now work from home, I think the kids would want to spend some time away from them. And those meeting rooms, I know, and Brad might know this better, but I think those meeting rooms really do get used by some of the clubs as well, and some students that use them.
Is the question, I think, being asked both by Sabina and then Scott clarified, is there a possibility of a 2 or 3 hour window to have it open on a Monday?
I would be more than happy to turn it over to Allison for that to answer in regards to providing those services at the library, and then I can expand what we might be able to do at the community center at the community college.
Yeah, unfortunately, having a facility open for a few hours a day is not an option that we can exercise with our staff. Our staff work, we either have full-time staff or 20-hour staff. So having a facility open just for a few hours a day isn't something that will work with the agreements that we have with our labor unions.
Thank you.
Have we talked to the school district at all about being a partner in this, or we haven't explored that?
I think it's definitely something that we can do moving forward. I mean, we have a partnership with them regarding the teen center that's meeting a lot of those needs that you're referring to. I think it's something we can definitely look at. I think as we visit those, as we have those discussions, right now they're just trying to figure out what the next day is going to look like and how to bring kids back and so on and so forth. And I think once they get that figured out, then these discussions would be easier to have. I think it will also help us, they're still trying to figure out how many kids are going to come back to in-person learning. And then, once again, how many of those kids are actually going to be hanging out after school that wouldn't be going to the teen center, that those parents are comfortable enough to be hanging out in a public space, at least until, we get back to a new normal. And what is, once again, what does that demographic look like? And and those hours. And I think we can, we'll work with the school regarding that. We would work with the community college. And then once again, we have the Doherty Station Community Center there that we could look at. Can we provide any of those resources in any of those facilities?
Scott, and then,
So I was
listen,
just gonna add on, do we have a cost of how much it'll cost us to open the library on a Monday from 10 to 8?
Yeah, if we were to go back to normal operations on Monday, that would be, the current year was quoted at $94,000 annually.
Thank you.
Scott, then Dave, then Bill.
You kind of answered it. We have the Doherty Station Community Center next door. And so maybe there's an opportunity on Monday afternoons to make some space available for those few dozen kids that would normally use the library, but we could use the community center instead.
Dave.
Correct. Yeah, that is definitely something that staff is looking into and figuring out. How can we utilize those spaces and get the kids to take advantage of it?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is the interest is there. Enough people have talked about it at the council level. Please take it back to Parks. Let them know there is at least some concern that maybe Monday would be better to leave open. I hate to try and pick how they're going to work their budget. They may find something more important and probably had this discussion already anyway. But if you would, Brad, or whoever is listening back to that department, let them know that council is asking to at least explore Monday. I would hate to say taking direction to do it on Monday and find out the schools aren't even open or that they aren't taking students in that day. But there's enough interest, I think, that's been expressed here tonight to say, take a look at it again. 94,000, I don't want to say, no, we're going to take it out of something else when I don't know what it is. But that's what our Parks Commission does.
Yeah,
Bill, you
if
had a
I can
comment?
just add, if I can just expand on that. So you're right. We talked about it quite a bit at the Parks, the Parks Commission level. And, as I mentioned, that they were unanimously approved moving it forward with the 5 days a week service, operating Tuesday through Saturday with, seeing how it went with the Mondays and meeting those needs and what those needs might be, because it might change when we get back to the new norm, especially with the community college. So they approved moving it forward, and we do, yeah, and we would love direction from council on this because the county, of course, needs to, this is all effective January 1st, 2021.
So I think, the elephant in the room here is, didn't we just go to red today in the county?
Yeah.
I mean, it's ironic that we're maybe it's just, we spent less time debating or not about borrowing $15 million for a bridge. And we do not know what's going to happen next week versus 7 or 8 weeks from now. And the public health experts are not, I'm not hearing rosy projections from them. And I don't know why we'd be planning on having 6 kids in a conference room. I don't think that would be acceptable to the county public health department. I don't know about the library. So, I realize there's a desire for plans here, but the plans got blown up in the middle of March. And I would caution, and the schools, is Monday a virtual day for the schools? I don't really know, but that, either Monday would be or Friday would be if they're going to go 2 and 2, right? So I don't know what the story is there, but there's always those sorts of considerations. I don't think there's a lot of money at this point in our budget. Frankly, it's the mid-year might look kind of grim based on what the first quarter of this year looked like. So I would just, there's a lot of moving parts here, and I would, I'm just one counsel here, I'm counseling caution on whatever happens, because is the library even open now? Other than they don't let me in. That's right? I mean, you go to, it's a takeout, right?
Yeah, it's takeout. We call it front door service.
So,
Yes.
I have, if it's takeout when we were at Orange, why would it be anything different when we're at Red? It's likely it's not going to be open in January. No, God willing, it's going to be open in March. And I know you've got your union contract stuff, but I think we're kidding ourselves if we think it's going to be any different in 6 or 8 weeks than it is now. I'm not going back to work in January, I don't think. Sorry, go ahead.
Sure. We are planning to start allowing the public into the library in limited capacities in early 2021. The state has lumped us in with retail. So according to the state, even at this moment in time, I think we could have 50% of our capacity. However, facilities aren't ready yet. We're still working on getting the plexiglass installed and, reconfiguring furniture and so on and so forth. So I do expect that we will have a change in early 2021 as long as the state is still allowing at least 25% for retail.
Thank you. I'm not going to belabor this. This is difficult stuff. And as Dave and Sabina both said, there's trepidation about any sort of plans, and I'm willing to go along with what the council thinks makes sense. So just offer my 2 cents.
Scott.
I just wanted to say that we're all right here. The library opportunities post-COVID, we're going to have to pay attention to that. But the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months are going to be some variation on what we're doing now, with the potential of opening up for some small groups. So I think approving this service level change January through June, it's quite likely that by June we're still in some form of, this COVID-19 restrictive nature until the large quantities of people are vaccinated. We're going to be doing less, not more. So I think approving this for now makes sense. Working with the library, working with the Parks Commission, and working with the school district all makes sense. But Phil's right. We don't have a lot of money.
If that's a motion, I'll second it.
Resolution 2020-110.
Motion by Perkins.
I did second.
Second by Hudson.
With the stressing on that point, he said that the council was very interested in that Monday, and when you sent it back to Parks.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with, we can, for the next 6 months, we can, and that's what this says. So till 30th June 2021. But in the meantime, I would like to see how we work towards making sure that after that, in the long run, we have a plan to bring Mondays back.
See no further discussion. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Hudson,
Aye.
Councilmember Alone,
Aye.
Councilmember Perkins,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Safar,
Aye.
and Mayor Clarkson.
Aye.
You do have one hand raised. I just saw that.
Now, didn't we have public discussion?
Not for this item, no.
Let's go ahead and have it.
The comment is from Joyce.
Please. Hello, Joyce.
Hi.
Hello.
I don't see me up there. I'm not sure.
We hear you.
Okay. You all, I think all of you know who I am.
Yes.
To put in my 2 cents about this. First, I wanted to thank you all for always being a leader in contributing as far as supporting the public library. You know, San Ramon was the first to do Sunday hours. San Ramon built 2 libraries. San Ramon has always been a leader in providing library service for the public. And you've always been a constant and reliable partner. But in these economically challenging times, I have faith that you'll work out a solution to this. A couple of things I wanted you to consider. First, the DVC hours are not really additional replacement hours for the public hours. First, we don't know for sure if their Wi-Fi is going to be available to the public or not. That's still a question. They have a small book collection. They're required only to have books that pertain to their courses. So they're not going to have the typical books that the students or the parents are looking for in the library. We don't know if they're going to be open in the summer. And those additional 38 hours aren't really additional. There's only the Monday hours that are additional to the public library hours. Secondly, if you reduce the hours and if it means laying off staff, then it's not a quick solution to hire those staff back. You decide all of a sudden that you want to open Doherty days. And third, I don't know what the current usage statistics are of the library, but it used to be that Sunday was the most important, the busiest in the San Ramon Library. So that would be something to look at least for the future when you're back open to full hours. So thanks for listening and for always being a strong supporter of the public libraries in San Ramon.
Thank you, Joyce. I think we have more hands raised, don't we?
No, not from the public.
Not from the public. Dave.
Yeah, I don't want to get away from this because we discussed this, Mayor, at a DBOC meeting. What's really important about this Doherty Valley Library, not the station, but the college, was that it opened you to the UC system and connecting through that. This is an expansion for people out there that could use library services. The other part to me, and I was going to ask Brad about it, but my recollection of the growth management element is it actually had square footages or hours or whatever mentioned in there as part of what you had to do with the original Measure C and Measure J. And I think this brings us up a lot closer to what we would need. Now, there are going to be different services in different places, and it's going to be hard to match until we have unlimited funds that could do anything. But I think that we're not giving this Doherty Valley College library enough potential for what it could add to the community.
Scott.
I just want to point out that if you total it all up, it's 136 hours a week. Now, Dave is right that not every place gives the same services, but that's okay. You know, if we can get access to UC library materials through the county or through the DVC, that's fabulous. So we can get different things from different places, and we get 138 hours over time. Some are going to open early in the morning, 8:30, and some are going to open at 10. Some are going to close at 5. Some are going to close at 10. So it's different things, different places, and we ought to post those hours somewhere prominent at each site so people know that if they want to get early morning services, they may have to go to the college. If they want to get late evening services, they're going to have to go to one of our other libraries.
Sabina.
Yeah, so I was going to say, Dave, thanks for sharing about that they'll have access to the UC system. I think that is very important because that's the largest library system after the Library of Congress in California and the US. So that's an important point we should certainly bring out, and because that's a huge asset being right here in the community. So thanks for sharing that.
Okay, seeing no further questions, there's been a motion made. It's been seconded. Madam-
I think we voted, Bill.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm so used to going to that.
Joyce
Thank
Scott
you.
came in late.
There
Yeah,
was a
I know.
vote.
Joyce's comments were well taken, though. Martin, do we have to, are we good? Or do we need, sorry.
You don't have to re-vote it unless there's been a change of heart on the motion. Otherwise, because it wasn't a public hearing, we can go forward.
Thank you, Martin. Appreciate that. All right.
We can rescind and do another one, but you don't have
Thanks, Allison.
Yes. Madam Clerk, I
Next time you
believe.
got to bring Nancy with you.
We let her go on vacation every once in a while. Thank you, everybody. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Thank you, everybody, very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad. Madam Clerk, our next item is going to be a longer discussion, so I'm going to ask that we all take a 5-minute break.
Thanks, Bill.
Take 5 minutes, be back here in 5.
Thank you. My cat only drinks from a tap, so she was just waiting for me to take a break and turn on the tap for her. She drinks running water.
Yeah, cats are strange. I wanted to thank you all for allowing us to take a quick break. Nothing's worse than having an important discussion and being a little squirmy. I see most all of us here. Council members are all here. All right, we'll wait for Joe.
That's a nice picture of Joe.
Yeah. All right. I think we're all set to go. Madam Clerk, you good to go?
I am.
All right, then we will resume. Madam Clerk, next item.
Item 12.3, public hearing, introduction of ordinances, numbers next in line, approving the City Walk development agreements. Ordinance next in line, adopting City Walk development agreement regarding Bishop Ranch parcel 1A. Number 2, adopting City Walk development agreement regarding Bishop Ranch parcel 3A. And number 3, ordinance next in line, adopting City Walk development agreement regarding Bishop Ranch parcel 2600. Staff report by Debbie Chamberlain, Community Development Director.
Hello, Debbie.
Hello. Here I go again to wrap up your evening as I began at 5:30. So let me share my screen. So I'm going to provide a presentation, and then following my presentation, Jerry Ingen from Sunset will have one also. And then Alex Marin also will have a few words that he'd like to say. And then their attorney, Patty Curtin, also will be on the call, along with the negotiators, Joe and Martin and myself. So let's go to share screen. If I can remember how to do this. Go away. There we go. Always a little awkward to get these started, isn't it? Okay. Well, good evening. We're here tonight to discuss the proposed development agreements for the City Walk. As Christina mentioned, there are 3 agreements that relate to Bishop Ranch 1A, Bishop Ranch 3A, and Bishop Ranch 2600. So just as a quick reminder, if we've all forgotten what was recently approved in September of this year by the City Council as our City Walk project. And so some more recent background for you. As you know, the commission held hearings in June and July and August where they approved the project and certified the EIR. In August, on August 14th, an appeal was filed of the commission's decision. And then on September 8th, the council did hold that final hearing and denied the appeal and upheld the approval of the commission. The development agreements were filed in late September, and we also hosted a workshop with the Parks and Community Service Commission to get their comments on the park credit and the fee proposal. And then the commission held 2 public hearings, one on October 6th, where they just had some discussion and public testimony. And then on the 20th, they recommended the agreements to the City Council for consideration. So just a little background, we don't do a lot of development agreements in the city. Last year, the council reviewed the Freya Ranch agreement, and now we have the 3 City Walks. So California law does allow for cities to enter into agreements to limit the lack of certainty in the approval of the development projects. There are contractual arrangements, meaning that the DA is intended to benefit both parties. And the DAs on approval provide assurance to the applicants that the project can move forward with the existing rules and regulations that are in time at that place. They lock in city impact fees for the term of the agreement. And in exchange for entering into a development agreement, cities can negotiate additional community-wide benefits. And development agreements are very, very common in nature for projects of this large-scale master plan size because they do span over a number of years. They're not your typical. This project, as we know, will be a 25-year horizon. So the negotiators for the 3 development agreements were the city manager, the city attorney, and myself. Prior to approaching the negotiations, we wanted to be very thoughtful, and as we look towards the community-wide benefit portion of the agreement that we'll get into in a bit. So we focused on the city council's goals, which the main one is housing in the core. And then we also focus on our general plan parks policies. And then, of course, our parks, trails, open space, and recreation master plan really help guide the park discussion. And so what we wanted to do is really these agreements to balance the needs of the city investments in parks over the course of the 25-year horizon of the project. So as I mentioned, there are 2 hearings by the Planning Commission on the 6th and on the 20th. And on the 20th, the Commission met and discussed and determined the agreements were in the best interest of the city. And they did find that they were in conformance with the general plan. As part of their discussion, they had 6 modifications to the agreement, which the agreements in front of you do reflect those modifications. The term was amended for the 15 years and then allows two 10-year extensions necessary for the developer to fulfill the obligations and commitments. The commission was concerned that the agreement would expire before all the obligations identified would be fulfilled by the developer. Regarding the timing and the construction of the project and the phasing of the completion, if there is a component that is identified in the amenity exhibit that would be pushed out past the time frame that's identified for construction, such as one of the park components. If it was going to go beyond the time frame that's identified in the development agreement, that change would go before the city council for consideration. So it's a little higher bar. Additionally, Sunset committed to constructing all affordable housing within City Walk. All the construction will be point of sale, acknowledges that a stronger commitment. So the development agreements provide that the city will be the point of sale for all construction sales tax. So that will benefit the city by that sales tax not going to the county pool. And so we will get our full portion of our sales tax from construction material sales, I should say. Regarding the park and facility park credit and facility impact fee, was added to require a meet and confer 6 months prior to the expiration agreement to discuss the long-term maintenance where Sunset would continue to maintain, or if the city would take over maintenance. And then section 9.2 park credit and facility impact fee. This would require that fee payment if all park acreage is not provided. And I will we get down to, so when you're looking at a master plan scale, you have your acreages that are associated with each of the improvements and your other development that's going to occur. Sometimes those get down to the final engineering level. Sometimes those numbers just don't add up. So if we become, let's say one of the parks that's supposed to be 1 acre comes in at 0.8 acres, we would get a fee payout for the additional 0.2 of an acre that they couldn't provide us. So it's just as a backup, just in case the numbers 25 years down the road don't all work out. And so mentioning one of those slight modifications, as you saw in the staff report, we did discover that after the commission's actions that within the parkways where 10.5 acres was identified, we learned that 2.1 acres was actually located in the city's right-of-way. So now the credit associated with the parkways or the future walking district has been reduced to 8.4 acres, which has had this inconsistency been caught down the road, we would have come to the same conclusion that we're sharing with you tonight. So the park credit was reduced from the 33.1 to 31.2 to account for that reduced acreage. But so this credit does still include the acquisition and construction and Sunset Development still intends to construct amenities in that portion of the public right of way. We value cost credit. The offsite park construction cost did not change. It does include design and an inflation adjustment. And the park and rec facility impact fee did increase from 8.1 to 9.4, which is roughly about $1.2 million increase. So we end up getting more additional monies for the park fund to help with construction of new park facilities. So regarding the community-wide benefit that we were able to work through with Sunset. So Sunset's going to design and construct 38 acres of park, privately maintained and publicly accessible in perpetuity. They're going to construct and maintain 2.1 acres of parks on the city-owned public right-of-way, fund the design and construction of Henry Ranch and the Woodlot Parks, which are on the west side, which are a high priority for the parks master plan. They're going to replace one existing turf field, with a synthetic turf field at Iron Horse Middle School. They're going to pay in advance the open space impact fee. So there'll be 2 installments. The first installment at the issuance of the first building permit, and the second installment at the issuance of the 600th building permit, for a total amount of about $3.3 million. As I did mention, they're going to construct all affordable units within the master plan property. They will, if the amphitheater in Annabelle Lake that is currently shown is not constructed, they will contribute an additional $750,000 to the Parks Master Fund. Within the agreements, there's a provide services. And as I mentioned, point of sale locations for all construction sales tax purposes. So as we know, a big component of the development agreement is the park credit and the fee. As with the recent adoption of the Park Master Plan, it's a comprehensive plan for the city that includes components that are not park related. And so the primary areas in the Parks Master Plan are park development and park improvements, open space and trail development, the Bike Master Plan, and program research and planning development. So as you can see from the list on the PowerPoint slide, we've already begun to implement the Park Master Plan with the identified projects. In the agreement will facilitate further construction of projects that are identified in the Parks Master Plan. So the ones on the slide here, these have already been funded and are planned for completion by 2023. So these are already obligations the city has taken on and are funding right now. And looking at the list, so this would be for Henry Ranch, the Woodlot, or the City Green. So the features listed here that are all identified in the Parks Master Plan, from a water play feature on the west side to paved walking loops, outdoor fitness, cricket pitches, shade structures, group picnic areas, cornhole, ping pong, and foosball. All these items are identified in the Parks Master Plan, can be accommodated in one of the 3 parks that I mentioned, Henry, the Woodlot, or the City Green. So we're continuing to fill that master plan, and we have these 3 new parks coming online. We can accommodate a significant component of the amenities that are identified in the Parks Master Plan. And additionally, as I've mentioned, Sunset's going to pay over $9.4 million in park fees. So with the help of our Parks and Community Service Director, Kathy Hyman, she put together this slide and the other previous ones for me that identify potential funding for this impact fee that we'll be collecting. So the items listed, we have additional paved walking loops, we have dog park upgrades, Wi-Fi access Central Park, develop 8th Park, renovation on Crow Canyon Gardens, restoration of Forest Home Farms, are all items that are identified in the master plan that come out to about $9.3 million. So as you can see, the $9.3 to $9.4 million will go a long way to helping to fulfill the goals in the master plan. Additionally, I wanted to talk about the open space fee, the $3.37 million, and it can be spent in a couple different ways. We can have acquisition of new land. We can partnership with outside agencies to maximize the use of funds. So we can work with to seek grants, support grants, or even join with other agencies to purchase open space with these funds. But there are other uses that the open space funds could be used for to support the park's master plan. And they can include the trail directional signage at the 5 trails, a loop trail in the open space, shade and seating, old ranch shared use path, and just to name a few. So as I'm kind of trying to summarize here, the fees that we're accepting or would be accepting from Sunset, the offsite park construction, the open space fees to name, and the construction of the parks within City Walk all go to fulfill the park's master plan, and the elements in the park's master plan can be incorporated into those parks. So I want to touch on a bit more on the benefits of the agreement. As we've been discussing, the agreements provide community-wide benefits for improvements and ensure the may take years to realize. For example, the phasing schedule in Exhibit E ties amenities to construction of units. So certain parks come online with certain units. Without the development agreement, Sunset would have the ability to construct a significant number of units, but would not be required to construct a park. That maybe it would be a private park, or the city park would be tied to a unit more than likely, but a private park for the use of their residents could come much later in the construction of the development. So with amenity E, as is in your packet, it identifies when all these amenities will come online, from the parks to some of the trails. And so those are really tied to the development agreement, which we would not be able to do that unless we had the agreement. Park funds for a typical subdivision project are collected incrementally, deposited into the park fund account. And these funds are not, there can be used citywide for capital improvement to existing parks or construction of new parks. So the funds that come in, they may go to continue to improve our existing parks where capital facilities need to be replaced, but they may not always go to fund the new parks. So part of the agreement, we've secured funding for the 2 offsite parks, plus the synthetic turf field at Iron Horse Middle School. And park funds that are collected are not required to be committed to a specific project area. So the park funds may not go to Henry Ranch Park. They could go to any other park that the council would decide to direct those funds to. And as we've been talking about our regional housing needs allocation that we're working through, residential development will continue in the city. And so we will be having future park funds will be coming in to contribute to the park fund also. So I want to talk just briefly and just kind of summarize a bit on the financial benefit. So as we've talked about, we're $38.25 parks, a little over almost $700,000 for 2.1 acres of maintained parks on the city right away. $10.4 million for offsite park construction, $9.4 million for park fees, $3.3 million in accelerated open space fee payment. Additionally, which is not included in any of the numbers that the city negotiated, City Walk. And then based on the HRA fiscal analysis that was conducted, the city may see up to $200,000 in construction sales tax annually that will go to our general fund. We received the staff report, accept public comment or close the public hearing, discuss, deliberate, and if necessary, we can discuss any changes the council may have, and then introduce the ordinances for discussion, waive the reading, and set November 24th for adoption. With that, I can answer any questions, or we can turn to Mr. Engen and his presentation.
Jerry, why don't you go ahead?
Good morning or good evening, everybody. First, I'd actually like to have Alexander start. I think he would like to do some opening remarks before I go forward with the presentation.
Thanks, Jerry. Mayor Clarkson, if you'll permit me, I'd just like to make a brief opening statement. For me, this is likely the last time that I'll be in front of this council led by Mayor Clarkson. I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on that. We've done a lot together, from big things like constructing the city hall to small things like hosting regional events and conferences. And I want to express my gratitude for having had those opportunities and call out some important things that I'll remember about the last 8 years or so. You all have always promoted Bishop Branch as a key asset in the city and included us where appropriate. This has furthered the sense that Bishop Branch and San Ramon are becoming one entity, which I view as a critical piece of our mutual growth and success. It's been more than 30 years since the annexation, so it's about time. You've always been fair and ethical. You know that ethics and fairness are central to everything that I do, and I've truly appreciated that. You've been balanced and have listened to all voices while weighing what is best for the community as a whole, and have run things with complete decorum. You've always kept your word. When we put our efforts behind a project, we commit tremendous resources to it, years before anyone sees construction. I've always been able to rely on what you've told me long before it's in ink. You've worked hard to find the right answer where one was not easily apparent. In many cases, this involved a lot of work and extra time, all voluntary and taken away from your own time with family and your own livelihoods. Finally, you've been visionary about the future of San Ramon in a way that I find incredibly appropriate, not being pedantic, but charting broad and ambitious goals that you've accomplished, which has been great. So on behalf of our family and our company, I want to thank you, Mayor Clarkson, Vice Mayor Zafar, Council Members Hudson, Perkins, and Alone for your leadership. It's been a pleasure working with you all, and I've enjoyed becoming your friends through that process. I look forward to continuing to work with many of you. And most of all, I look forward to many more years of success for San Ramon, building on your legacy and the tone you've set. Thank you very much.
Alex, thank you. That was very nice. Jerry.
So, well, I have a couple things related to the subject matter at hand also. So,
sure.
If you permit me, I wanted to just cover 2 brief points and then turn it over to Jerry. We appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to discuss this agreement. It provides a framework and financial structure for how we're going to build this ambitious and long-term project. Personally, I feel like the agreement gives the city a great deal of certainty and financial benefit in excess of what would likely be achieved if we were negotiating this on a piecemeal basis. It also gives us certainty and the ability to plan, which is important for our business. 2 things I want to talk to both relate to parks. The first is the parks credits that are proposed. I really feel that we missed an opportunity in the way that we presented these parks from the very beginning of the project. What we propose are privately owned, publicly accessible open spaces, or POPOs. This is a new concept to us, and it's new to San Ramon, and we should have been more specific about how we presented it. Rather than proposing we just pay a fee that goes towards the construction of public parks by the city, we propose this format for a number of reasons. Those include that the scale of the project made it deserve its own internal parks. It was, we couldn't have a project this size with no parks. We wanted the downtown neighborhoods to feel spacious and beautiful, maybe not as spacious as having a 2-acre park like a subdivision has, but spacious in a new suburban downtown style that we're really inventing here as we go. When I say that, I really mean it. There aren't any suburban places that we can look to that we feel achieve the same goals we're aiming for. We took many inspirations from cities. I know you did as well, Mayor Clarkson, with many walks in San Francisco, which we appreciate, all the inspiration that brought to our project in the walking district. But there really isn't another suburban place like it, we don't think. The Popos concept comes from cities. It was first started in New York City in the 1960s, but we really want the character of this project to be a mix between suburban and urban, probably leaning more towards suburban, if anything. We wanted at-grade parks that could grow big trees and not solely rely on the open space in the interior of the four walls of our buildings, where trees wouldn't grow like they do when they can get to the groundwater. We know from seeing this Popos trend across the country that these privately funded, designed, and built parks provide a new type of park that has a distinct feel from parks designed and built by cities. People love unique places in a city, and that quality of these parks is one of the reasons I think many non-City Walk residents will frequent them, which is a key reason to build them in the first place. There's also tremendous value that's derived from private construction, just like the value we achieved at the City Hall project. Because of the public access, this value will be delivered to the public, both in the product that's there and in the form of the ongoing maintenance. Lastly, it makes financial sense for us, the developer, to contribute the adjacent land for parks for the overall benefit of the neighborhood, which I think has been the case with other projects in San Ramon. So in my mind, the alternative of accepting a fee which only covers half of the cost of achieving the general plan park goals versus accepting a credit for a fraction of the value the city would need to purchase the equivalent land doesn't really make sense. I don't even really understand why we can't get 100% of the value that we're contributing, given that the city would have to build it if we didn't contribute it. But we're past that at this point. Having the parks be public was something everyone wanted, including us, and the credit's been whittled down first with multiple passes with the city staff and then with the commission. I understand the logic and emotion that causes it to be a prickly issue with some, but when you look at the facts, I think the credits we're down to are very fair. The second issue quickly is the design of the parks. One of the commissioners had said that they're not comfortable with not knowing what the design of the parks would be, citing that we're ostensibly using public funds to build them. On the second count about the public funds, I totally agree. I think it's a good point. One counterpoint to that is that adding a public design process would erode some of the unique character we're trying to add with the concept of Popos. But I would ask that this remain a review and comment rather than a full public design charrette to avoid blurring those lines. Oversight's clearly appropriate, and each one will go through ARB and design and abide by design guidelines. I do disagree with the notion that they should be designed today. Perhaps I misunderstood, but that I don't think would be good. I was thinking about design, and you want something to be timeless, so why couldn't you design it today? It should be, if it's timeless, it'll be great 20 years from now. And I thought about the Golden Gate Bridge. Certainly if somebody was to say today that they're going to build a bridge between Marin and San Francisco, and it's going to look like the Golden Gate Bridge rather than the beautiful designs Robin showed us earlier, people would be in total revolt. Now, the Golden Gate Bridge is obviously one of the world's most beautiful and beloved bridges, but I think that has a lot to do with the years following 1937, the engineering marvel that it was at the time, and its sort of iconic status and adoption in the time that it was built. And now you don't think twice about the Golden Gate Bridge. Other things you might think twice about, but things like that really go down as timeless, iconic assets aren't designed for a different time. So I think the oversight would be good at the time, but concerned about designing them now. I did want to just make one quick comment that there was talk about, this could be, what if they just build a grassy patch or a grassy knoll? In fact, one of the key things I would like to see in those projects is a grass panel. I think they're great for playing Frisbee. They're great for laying out on a towel. And I hope that it's not viewed down the line that we're cheaping out or cutting corners because we didn't put a bunch of gadgets in there and we put a grass panel. We'll obviously have a great, well-designed park, but some of the most beautiful parks in the world don't have a bunch of stuff in them. There's going to be stuff and different things. People love the stuff, but some of them will be simple and elegant. And I hope that that's allowed again down the line. So In closing, I just want to reiterate my thanks to you all and thanks for the shared vision to bring this project forward. I'd like to thank the staff who, while they were tough on the DA negotiations, they've been great to work with as always, and we look forward to starting to build this. I appreciate your time, and with your permission, I'll turn it over to Jerry.
Thank you, Alex. Is it okay if I share my screen for a presentation?
Absolutely.
Great. Can you all see that?
We can.
Awesome. Okay, well, good evening, Mayor Clarkson and members of the council. I'll state for the record, my name is Jerry Engen, Senior Vice President of Development and Construction for Sunset. Thanks for allowing me to do this presentation. I'm going to focus, as Alex did, primarily on the parks and the parks credit, as that is probably the most detailed and complicated component of the development agreement. Okay, so to build on what Alex was talking about on Popos, and as Alex said, it's new to San Ramon, but it's really not a new concept for the more urban communities like New York and San Francisco, which is, I think New York started it in the 60s and San Francisco in the 90s. But as Alex said, it is privately owned public open spaces, and Popos for short, and by definition are really hybrid spaces that are owned and managed by private developers, but yet under agreement with local government and are open to the public and required to follow certain regulations, not only to allow, but to encourage public use. They are specific type of open space which the public are invited to use, but remain privately owned and maintained, thus alleviating long-term maintenance and liability costs to the city. They're no different than public spaces in the sense that they are publicly accessible and usable. They are places for people to gather and create a more enjoyable and urban experience. They're a key part of the city public realm networks and providing much needed open space in natural areas. So Popos is really a mechanism to increase provision of public spaces. They are more known and perceived, and the more they are known and perceived as public spaces, the more widely and actively they'll be used. The City Walk parks or Popos are designed to be open and clearly accessible to the public. They are intended to complement the city's public parks and open space and natural areas. These are open spaces and they're places of retreat, relaxation, recreation, and contribute to the health and well-being of the city residents, workers, and visitors. They form a part of the neighborhood character and create a sense of place and become a setting for a variety of uses. As an example, this is a linear park in San Francisco. It's called South Park, south of Market Street in San Francisco. So while this isn't your typical neighborhood square 2-acre park, you can see how useful and creative and interesting a linear park can be. So the City Walk Master Plan contemplates various types of open spaces, offering both active and passive settings while keeping within the mixed-use nature of Bishop Branch. Giving the public-private partnership, there will be specific design and approval process, which Alex mentioned. And so the intent was for us to oversee the design. We would obviously seek the input and expertise of the Parks and Community Services Department, followed by the review and approval of the Architectural Review Board and the Planning Commission. So now I want to talk about the various types of parks that we have with City Walk. And each of these typologies of parks are mentioned and dealt with in the design guidelines, and these design guidelines are robust and have been reviewed by ARB, Planning Commission, and ultimately this council as part of the master plan approval. And the landscape framework at City Walk includes the following components designed to work together to create a strong sense of place, character for the new community, blending both parks and our Popos. So we have the types of parks that we have within the City Walk Master Plan is the parkway system, which is surrounding the neighborhood on 2600 on Camino Ramon Executive Parkway in Bishop. It also extends down Camino Ramon to the other neighborhoods of BR1A and BR3A. The neighborhood streets, which are an important element that organize each of the neighborhoods into a pedestrian scale. The city green, which is located within the central and prominent location adjacent to City Center. and the lake parks that include both Lake Cecilia and Annabelle Lake and their associated amenities. The neighborhood parks that will create a focal point in the sense of place for each neighborhood. So there are a number of things on this plan that I wanted to kind of go through and point out for you. And it's interesting, it's important that all of these open spaces and parkways, they play an important and integrated role for the master plan, and all have different character and serve different purposes. So as we talked about the typology of the various parks, we have the parkway system, which is outlined in yellow, that surrounds, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it surrounds 2600 in yellow around the perimeter. That this acts as a ribbon and connects all of the neighborhoods and neighborhood streets and open space areas around 2600. It extends down in front of BR 3A and 1A. That creates the connective tissue for the entire master plan. Each community has its own neighborhood park that will each have a different character and serve different purposes. And you have the city green, of course, which here is located in this prominent location on the corner of Camino Ramon and Bishop, which will be really a main gateway into the master plan. We have the Fieldwork Brewery outdoor patio here. We have a new hotel proposed here across Camino Ramon, and then we have the city green. And the interesting part here with the city green too is it has a great interface with the new pedestrian promenade that is an extension of the city center avenue that extends across here. And this portion of it is a pedestrian only promenade. We're intending to have restaurants here in these buildings and try to extend retail into this promenade as much as we can. As we know, it will probably take a while for the ability to bring retail to extend the entire length of the promenade. So we also have it set up to be creative office so that it can be full and a vibrant location for the city. These neighborhood streets play an important role too. And you'll see in one of the renderings later that how these will act and will function well as part of the walking district. This entire plan is a major component of the proposed city walking district within the city. A couple other important elements is we have this off-site bike trail that runs along Bishop Drive here that was built with City Center. It also extends across Camino Ramon and runs along the BR3 garage. And here we have a main connection that one of the amenities we're providing, which isn't accounted for again in this credit, is we're going to improve this area. We'll work with the Parks and Community Services Department to design this connection. This is near the foot of the pedestrian bridge that was talked about tonight. And so the idea is to have art and signage and maybe like bicycle repairs and those kind of things to really celebrate this connection. We're also extending the trail across Camino Ramon here on Executive Parkway in front of the Transit Center and creating another connection to Iron Horse Trail. So it really makes a complete connection to what is proposed as part of the walking districts within the city. And lastly, beyond the lake parks, we have also a significant amount of private open space. I think Alex mentioned, while many of urban infill projects, the only open space is this private open space. We have this open space that's in the footprint of the buildings. And the good thing about this is that this is where we really provide a lot of the amenities for each of the residents, barbecue areas, play areas, amenities and things that the residents will need, which helps free up the ability to design these beautiful, elegant parks that can both be active and passive and not have to have the same kind of elements in each neighborhood in the park because there's no other place to put it. So it really provides a great ability to create these beautiful park spaces. And this is the linear park here that we have. So that was a lot like what you saw in the South Park, San Francisco. So here is some images for the parkway system. On the top here, we have pictures of the existing landscape area that surrounds BR 2600. You'll notice on the right, you see the little workout units that will be there. Those kinds of elements along with other elements will be improved. These landscape areas, of course, will be significantly improved as part of this development. And so the renderings down below give you an idea. So the rendering on the bottom left here is a view from Camino Ramon against the residential neighborhood and how the parkway will interface with the residential neighborhood in the street. And the rendering on the right gives you view from walking within that parkway adjacent to the residential buildings in the street. And this parkway will be designed cohesive and along with the residential building, and will be one integrated, seamless, beautiful design as part of the parkway system. This is a section of the parkway that happens to be along Bishop Drive between Annabelle Lake and Bishop Drive. So along with a separated bike trail near the Bishop Drive, there's also the walkway, of course, next to the park. So this will be a beautiful section of the parkway, which will have a view of the park. And one of the other important elements that we're going to do, which isn't in the numbers for the credit, but we will be restriping Bishop Drive and adding on-street parking along Bishop Drive to provide convenient access and easy access to the lake parks. So this is a unique feature, I think, of part of our landscape framework. And the parkways are a minimum of 60 feet. They're made up of 50 feet of lineal park and along where the buildings are, 10 feet of minimum landscape zone adjacent to the building face. So these bullet points are just a few of the bullet points that come out of the design guidelines for this space to give you an idea of the elements that can be seen there. We have, providing a variety of spatial experiences and interspersed with amenities such as benches and art and exercise elements and more. It will respond to the adjacent open spaces, interconnections to streets and entries. There'll be enhanced connectivity to the Iron Horse Regional Trail, which I mentioned, and utilize the trees, shrubs, ground cover, and other landscape elements. This is a section of the parkway where it is adjacent to the residential buildings, whether it's on Executive Parkway or Camino Ramon. Next, we have the city green. These are images right out of our design guidelines to give us inspiration of how we can achieve the goals and objectives of the city green. This is, as I'm showing you on the plan, is located opposite City Center between Camino Ramon and the new pedestrian promenade walking street. This will really be the main site for social gatherings and special events and activities for daily life in the public realm. And again, some of the sample bullets, we will be building on its prominent location and enhanced visibility and a sense of openness that in a time that I can't read part of it because of the pictures are on there. So I'll do my best here. Has coherency and with the landscape frame that gives spatial definition to the park space. It should be designed as an open and extroverted open space that should attract city walk residents, visitors, Bishop Ranch employees, and welcoming to all residents in the city of San Ramon. We want to establish a strong connection to the promenade and the avenue at City Center to create a connection between the activities within each area. We want to provide an edge in transition to the adjacent residential buildings and promenade to the west and tie these activities within the park. Provide a large-scale central green that is flexible in nature, that allows a variety of activities on a day-to-day basis and destination to host seasonal and special activities and events. We move on to the neighborhood parks. And these are images out of our design guidelines. So you can see, along with creating active spaces, you can create beautiful, passive spaces as well. So we look to provide a variety of those. Some of the design bullets that come from our design guidelines is to design these to include flexible spaces capable of serving a variety of recreational and social aesthetic functions that fulfill the needs of the residents and enhance the quality and sustainability of the neighborhood. And want to provide layered green spaces with trees and shrubs and ground cover that are inviting and open to the surrounding neighborhood. We want to create positive transitions and appropriate separation from adjacent residential structures and clear entries and approaches. We want to have the majority of this area planted and keeping the impermeable areas to a minimum. We want to include modern street furnishings, artful playground equipment, and lighting that's elegant and timeless. And finally, of the park typologies, we have the lake parks. We have the images here of some of the existing amenities with the dock and the boats here. On the left, on the top right, is an image of the walking path and that is along the east end of the lake, southeast end. And then the bottom rendering is a view looking south on Annabelle Lake that shows where the proposed community center is built. And then you can see the sailboats and to the right of the community center, the dock that is proposed for the sailboats. I think it's important. I wanted to note that subsequent to the Planning Commission approval, we have proposed to accelerate the installation of this boat dock. So originally it was designed and programmed in the amenities phasing to be at the last phase of the project, but we're moving it up to the first phase to be at the time that we get to the 600 residential unit. So so some of the elements again around the lake parks, we have this plan provides for improvements around these open spaces that surround Lake Cecilia and Annabelle Lake. We have the community center amenity buildings and the amphitheater that's envisioned adjacent to Annabelle Lake. And this will be all for the use of City Walk residents, San Ramon residents, Bishop Rance office tenants. As I mentioned, we're adding additional parking along Bishop Drive in this area. Some of the bullet points, again, out of the design guidelines is to provide appropriate replacement of existing trees that are in poor condition or that must be removed to accommodate improved open space linkages, to connect to the new neighborhood parks with pathways and gracious transitions in grade, maintain the continuity of the pathways around the lakes, and other amenities that include the additional boat docks with sailboats and benches and art and other items that can be used. So again, I think what's important to remember, as Alex mentioned, this isn't a place where we're designing them, but what we did do is we put together a robust set of design guidelines that act as a framework of how the intended design each park typology as part of the system of parks and open spaces. And I obviously couldn't attach the entire set of design guidelines, but I attached a couple of slides to give you an idea of the amount of detail and thought that's gone into these guidelines to help guide this through the process. This particular rendering is a rendering of all of what the neighborhood streets will look like. So that's why I mentioned that these are part of a critical element for not just the walking district of the parkway, but throughout the development. These would be beautiful streets that are not like anything that are in San Ramon today. So the design guidelines contain 56 pages that call out all of the neighborhoods, all of the important elements, architecture, all of the parks and design elements that need to be dealt with. And so there was a lot of thought that's went into this. This other page, part of the design guidelines, starts to call out important elements around the parkway system and things that we need to pay attention to. Each of those numbers represent items. We got to look at the connection to City Green, the connections to the residential streets, how we address those when they intersect, how they intersect commercial entries. And so all of that stuff had thought as we intersect to Iron Horse Trail. So there is a good amount of information in here. And just to give you an idea here, I showed you a few bullets for the neighborhood parks, but there are significantly more bullets for each one of these. So there's a lot of information in here that will help guide this design as we go through this process. So I wanted to summarize that the POPOs are hybrid spaces owned and managed by a private developer, yet open to the public, required to follow certain regulations and allow and encourage public use. Sunset Development will seek the input from the Parks and Community Services Department prior to starting the design. And of course, we'll end up with a review through the Architectural Review Board and the Planning Commission for final approval. As public spaces are co-produced by private developers and local government, this creates new types of spaces that are emerging and making public and private spaces indistinguishable. Blurring the lines between public and private spaces creates more engaging, inclusive, and livable spaces. Private construction and contribution of land that derives significant value. I think this is a really important point that Alex touched on, is that by doing private construction and contribution of land, that derives significant value to the public versus publicly acquired and construction open space. So to try to talk about these financial benefits, I think it's important to look at this at a high level. And so what this table goes to show you is without the development agreement, in order for the city to be compliant with the general plan, you would have to acquire this parks, fund the offsite parks, fund the synthetic turf field, and of course, deal with maintenance over the term of the agreement. And in return, we would be paying only fees. And so you can see the large deficit that would be to the city. And so the value of our proposed agreement in this development agreement, you get the City Walk parks that will be dedicated in perpetuity for the public We will be funding and constructing the 2 offsite parks, funding the construction of the synthetic turf replacement, doing the maintenance for 25 years. And on top of that, we will also be paying an additional 9.4 million park fees that can be used to satisfy, as Debbie pointed out in her presentation, other master plan park goals, because the demand of our project will be served by our parks. And so you will not have to spend park money of this 9.4 million to satisfy the demand from our project, but use it for others. So with the value of the parks, the value of the park fees that you're going to receive, that's 120 million of value. And in return, we're getting a credit of $31.9 million. So you see this significant swing in financial benefit that this development agreement, I think, provides. And one last thing I wanted to point out, or 2 things I wanted to point out, is that our credit was based on the Nexus study from Kaiser Marston, which is really in 2017 dollars. However, the costs that we're going to have to spend to build all these parks are in today's dollars and future dollars. So there's a significant swing there. And one last thing is that we realize that in the development agreement, between the wording of the development agreement and the Exhibit I that talks about the park impact fees and the escalation amount, there's a discrepancy that we wanted to clear up, and that the park impact fees are to be raised 3% annually, but are to be the escalated 3% annually, but adjusted every 5 years. That's the way it's stated in the development agreement, but it didn't get stated exactly that way in Exhibit I, so we want to clean that up. So with that, I want to thank you. Of course, Alexander and I are here to answer any questions. We also have Patricia Curtin, our land use attorney, who can answer any legal questions. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jerry. Looking to my council members, I'd like to see if we could proceed with public comment first, or do you have clarifying questions? All right, we'll go to public comment first. Christina, I'll let you carry it on from here.
For those in the audience that would like to make a comment on this item, please use the raise your hand button or *9 on your telephone at this time. And it looks like we have 1 hand raised, and the first is from Jim Blickenstaff.
Hello, Jim. And Jim, you're familiar. Try to keep it 3 minutes or less. Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, you remind me if I don't, okay?
I sure will, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, well, interestingly enough, some of the issues I brought up in a paper submitted earlier have been addressed to this point. So I'm pleasantly surprised by that. And I want to say, Alex, for example, brought up something that hadn't really fully occurred to me earlier, that he believes in integrating natural foliage like trees with the development aspects and the view shed of the development. And I like that kind of feeling of bringing nature close to something that is man-made. And because without that kind of buffer of a green space and natural setting, buildings can look a little hard and stark. So that's a good component of what I always feel is appropriate, to bring nature in terms of trees or whatever, whenever possible. It really breaks up the outline. So most of the issues that I was thinking were still outstanding have been addressed, but there's a couple that still I'd like to see the city look at, so we get this right, you know. For example, I believe staff, planning director still has final authority over certain kinds of disputes or disagreements. I think it would behoove the city to be the final arbiter of that kind of situation in case it's not just administrative. That just seems appropriate from the city's point of view to take that final responsibility on disputes. I'd like to see that be made part of the development agreement, assuming it's not already, but I didn't see it. And then there's a density bonus that Sunset has agreed to. I think that they're not going to employ that. They're going to keep the numbers to 4,500 units. That's a component of the approvals, but it's not yet part of the development agreement. Again, I think it would be wise for the city to put that in the development agreement. Sunset's already agreed to it. And in case, for example, there's a transfer to another entity with different ideas, and that development agreement transfers to them, it still has in place the 4,500 unit limit. And I think that would be good for the future of the city to keep that in place. And my final thought is, the parks are critically important to quality of life. And the city really appreciates the fact when the citizens of the city has parks. So I'd like to make sure the city is comfortable with the park acreage as presented by staff in terms of their long-term future, because this is locked in. You can't do changes on this in different phases. It's locked in at this point. So this is the one chance to get it right. And so I'm putting a lot of that responsibility on the city shoulders at this moment to make sure they see the details that verifies to them that this is going to be a benefit for the citizens, especially in terms of the green space and the parks that will be needed to compensate for the population that's going to be part of the deal. And I think my time is up, isn't it, Clark?
Jim, you timed it perfectly. Thank you very much for your thoughtful comments.
Okay.
Christina, anybody else raise their hand?
That was the only request to speak, and I do not have any written comment for this item.
So I think anybody who would like to do it has had now that opportunity to raise their hand, so I will close the public comment. Okay, I'd like to open it back up to council members for questions or thoughts on this. I would like, if you could indulge me, if I could start and go first. This is a project that has been years in the making. And I think it's important that we put the evolution of this in context for the residents of San Ramon, and that this is not a one-off. This was a project that we as a council approached this and had a series of steps we've done to get to where we are today. And I'd like to talk about that briefly. And one is that this partnership with Bishop Ranch is really important. And our city has a rich history of doing great partnerships, whether it's the school district, the fire district, and now these private ones, including City Hall. And I think that we are a far better city because we have great partnerships. We also have, I think, an extraordinary partnership with Sunset. Alex talked about that. And I think his words rang absolutely true. Illustration was the construction of our new City Hall by Sunset in exchange for some land. And they did it at a cost that we could not replicate. And I know they did some special touches for us at even their own cost to make that a special place, especially that glass staircase that goes up. And a way of saying thank you and the fact that this is a pretty special relationship we have. And Sunset, to keep it in context too, has a rich history with the city of San Ramon. They came here in 1978 and buying this land. They've created a business core in the middle of San Ramon that is really second to nobody in the area, I would say in the state, if not the country. And they're a world-class organization. I think one of the reasons we're even entering into these conversations and are putting together this development agreement we will is because of our trust in each other. The city council approached this with some overarching goals. We wanted to protect our open spaces. We wanted to protect our existing neighborhoods to the extent we can. We also realized that we need to protect our retail centers because they were also going to be under a threat. And we also wanted to the extent we can, protect development on the borderlands of San Ramon because they would be under pressure for development. And there was dangerous threats on the horizon coming our way. In fact, they're still there. I'm sure Mr. Hudson could talk for a long time about the RENA numbers and the number of units they're going to want us to build here in San Ramon. And if we don't proactively find ways to allow growth that's going to be required in thoughtful ways, we will not have done a good service to our city. But we also saw some opportunities around the vacant lots around the city center. And we also saw empty parking lots over at Bishop Ranch 2600. And so we started a process of thinking about what it might look like. We've had walking tours the last couple of years around San Ramon and people talking about what it might look like. Some folks from Sunset actually did some just thoughtful discussions about what it might look like if there was a walking district there and different paths we might want to use. The council made it a priority to create a walking district. And I appreciate the trust that they had and taking this vision and starting to push it forward. Our planning department went out and got a retail study done on what are these systemic risks that our retail centers may be under coming into the future. And they identified especially housing as starting to crowd out retail spaces as retail is struggling in this sort of Amazon environment. And we know that our city budget is really contingent upon us having a robust sales tax base to the extent we can, that the threat of housing crowding out retail was real. And this council made a decision to take housing off of a number of our shopping centers. And it was a zero-sum game. It had to go somewhere. And we were lucky that Bishop Ranch was more than willing to accommodate and take those new units into their area. We also, in discussion with the Bishop Ranch, they decided they would be willing to allow BR 2600 to be rezoned for housing. Again, allowing us to locate housing critically where the jobs are, where the transportation is, where the retail is, and away from existing neighborhoods. The mechanism to make this work is a development agreement. And it's already been talked by Debbie, and she outlined all the pluses and minuses. It's a business transaction. We did with Doherty Valley. Both Sabina and Phil live out in Doherty Valley. And that agreement, which was done back in 1993 and 4 and formalized, we are still having to live with some 25, 27 years later. And there are things we look back upon that development agreement, how we might have wanted to have had it changed. So the word is, this is our chance to do it right, because you'll have to live with the consequences in the years after. And there are advantages to the builder, which has been talked about. There are advantages to us, and there are advantages to the residents of San Ramon. We held a series of workshops and meetings to give an idea of what we would like it to look like. Bishop Ranch developed a proposal, which they have brought to us. Our staff has been really thoughtful about negotiating this process before they bring it to us. This is our first chance as a council to talk about it, because we can't talk to each other about this because of the Brown Act. This is our first chance to really talk about it as a group. But our planning commission's had a bite at the apple. They've talked about it. Our planning commission talked about it twice, gotten that feedback. And I really appreciate hearing the kinds of amendments and changes, listening to the folks from those organizations. And as I approach this development agreement, it really needs to be a win-win. And I think the framework for us doing that is there. If we had worked with any other development company, and I won't name names, but anybody else had come into us, I don't think we could have had the same kinds of negotiations. I don't think we could have reached as fair terms for the developer and for us as we could with anybody else but Bishop Ranch. And I think the residents need to keep in mind the extraordinary things that Bishop Ranch has done for our community, and voluntarily has done things in advance. They opened up the lake and didn't have to. They've made improvements around the lake, and they made improvements to walking trails with no credits, nothing from us. They took those risks and opened those things up, which I appreciate, and those things should be, I think, recognized. And I think it pays off in the goodwill that we have with the city and with Bishop Ranch. And the residents of San Ramon, I think, as they have their jobs and they have their businesses in Bishop Ranch, or they enjoy the city center, or they enjoy walking around the lake, it's all a function of the great stuff that Sunset's done, and none of us should ever take that for granted, and I don't. Keep in mind that the DA, Development Agreement, is a complex financial agreement. And one of the cornerstones of how I approach this is the present value of money. And it's important that we recognize the dollars we establish today, $2,020. The credit we give them and the credits we get back both have to be anchored in present value dollars to 2020, so it's fair to both parties. And that is just a key concept that I have about this. I appreciate that one of my thoughts was that if they're going to have public parks, but privately owned, that the city would have a final say. And Alex has talked about the Planning Commission and the ARB having the ability to approve the projects, and I think that's great. We've talked about it being a net neutral business transaction for us. So the ongoing revenue that comes into the city from this development will be balanced with our expenses. And it sounds like that's going to be the case. We've done some financial studies, and we trust that those will work out well. And the I also appreciate the fact that I thought it was important that the lake and other improvements be open to the public as soon as possible. And I really appreciate them addressing that and saying that that would happen in a reasonable period of time. And so I appreciate all that. So before I talk about the things I think might get modified or changed, I wanted to share that background to the residents and share with them how I was approaching this before we get into the details of any kinds of tweaks we might want to do to this. So I'd like to open it up to the rest of my council members for their comments and thoughts.
I have a couple of comments, just if I could, Bill.
Please, Phil.
I think one of the, my understanding of, amongst other things, why a party such as Sunset would enter into an agreement like this is, a reasonable level of certainty is a really important thing for somebody who's investing for the long term. The ability to mitigate risk, and I think that's also true of the city. There's a lot of risks that will be mitigated by this as well, and I'm sure that the lenders tie numbers to that risk on Sunset side, but from my perspective, the fact that one party is doing this and who the party is a big deal in comfort level and risk reduction from my own perspective. Just a couple of things, just minor things. I think it's a great idea for Bishop Drive to be have parking on it, because it's just nice to pop in and walk. Like where I grew up, that's what you did. You don't have to go park in a parking structure to go to something that you'd like to think is reasonably spontaneous. That's one thing. I'm also some of the design elements very much remind me of some of my favorite parts of the newer parts of Portland, which I think is a wonderful thing. And some of this also really does remind me of where I grew up. I grew up on a street that was actually a parkway, and we had a mall in the middle, and it was such an amenity, and we knew it was a wonderful thing. It didn't have a lot of stuff in it, but other than the cops chasing us off for playing football on it, but nonetheless, it was that sort of a connection to a Olmsted Park that was a mile away is, these sort of walkways and connections and all that are hugely important to getting people out and active and doing what we want them to do. So, and finally, the upfront commitments as it relates to open space and the acreage for building out it's one thing to have land, it's quite another to actually build parks on it. And I mean, the woodlots sat moribund for, I don't even know how long. And, some things like that are a big deal. Henry Ranch is something like a 14-acre possible park. That's a big deal to actually go in and do something with it. And I like the idea of letting this evolve as well, as Alex mentioned. What might the design look like in 10 years? It may change a little bit, and the elements of what they're trying to do here are really, I think, first rate. I'm also one of the worst things about being on these Zoom meetings that I know my face is always right there, right? But somehow my jaw did not drop when Jim Blickenstaff agreed with almost everything. So I don't know if Alex has some Svengali thing that he's doing with Jim right now, but I think it's also or maybe it's Jerry. Yeah, I think it's also indicative of the give and take that's gone on. That there's been a lot of listening on both sides. And I'd like to also just thank Joe and Debbie and Martin. I know this has been a grind doing all this, and there's a lot of effort involved, and I'm sure we'll see your imprints on this over time as well. So I I'm open to what some, what else folks have to say. I like this, and I like the idea too. I am glad you're thinking about putting that dock in early. I think that's an excellent idea. Just some nice ads and early amenities probably also make things more attractive to possible residents that you're trying to attract. So I'm sure that's got some, that's got to be front of mind as well. So that's it. Thank you.
Dave, you're next.
Yeah, I'll stay with that theme. I like that dock idea coming up sooner than later. I think your second story of 2600, where your offices are going to end up being like a lounge for some of these people afterwards. I guess I shouldn't tell you I go up there. But the other thing I like is the parking idea, and I think you're going to be using not only cars but bikes there quite a bit, as that traffic just explodes like it has since March. I don't know where Jim's going with the 4,500. You're not going to lock it in. The reality is it might go higher, but you're not going to change that. And I don't think we need to. I'm not as enthusiastic as he is about locking it down. I've seen some things in the last 20 years in these cities that are doing changes. We think San Francisco has done a lot of construction. Go to Sydney, Australia, and what they have done in places like Darling Harbor. They've changed ideas 3 or 4 times just in this century. I think you're on the right path. I get a little leery when I say tweak, because we try to put some of our own ideas in. We find out that sounds great, but oops. This is above everything else, bringing in a captive audience for something that means a lot to us called City Center. I mean, we've got a core going right now, and there's a second, third, fourth phase, wherever it's going, and it has to be successful. And I'm glad that you are keeping the ownership on this, because you're the one that can see what's working and what isn't the fastest. I mean, it's called the pocketbook. And if it doesn't work, you're going to have to change something that keeps people buying in there, living in there, and doing whatever. I've seen it work where I told you in other places. I like this idea, and I really want to see where it'll go, not only initially, but when you start shifting gears and see it change over the next 4 or 5 years, assuming I'm around.
Scott.
Alex, I remember talking with you more than a year ago, and we talked about whether you should bring this thing piecemeal to the council, and for development, or we should look at it all at once. And I was kind of inclined that we do this piecemeal, because I thought that, doing it all at once might generate some real problems. But obviously, doing it all at once makes the most sense, particularly when it comes to this development agreement. We could have done the individual pieces in terms of, the EIR and those kinds of things, and that would have been cumbersome. But doing this development agreement all at once really does make sense. Over the past couple of months, I've been walking the neighborhood in District 1. Didn't get to as many houses as I wanted, but this city walk plan came up a few times, and there was some reluctance by the people I talked with, but for the most part, well, in fact, almost without exception, after we talked about it for a few minutes, they said, well, gosh, that really does make sense. To have 4,500 units that are studios, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and a few 3 bedroom in the heart of Bishop Ranch really makes sense. And then I talked about the parks that are going to come with it, and I talked about the park fees. I didn't have the details at that time when I talked to most of these people, but I said, you go over to Bishop Ranch and you look at that place, walk into BR3 lobby, and that building is, I don't know what, 20, 25 years old, but it's gorgeous today. And I said, Bishop Ranch isn't going to sell this. They're going to manage it. It's going to be their people that own it, operate it, and maintain it. And so we shouldn't, we should be grateful that there's a company of the quality of Sunset Development that's going to do this. The certainty that this, Phil mentioned the certainty that this development agreement allows for reducing risk. It reduces the risk to the city. It reduces the risk to you. And that has value that'll transcend all of us that are here on this Zoom meeting tonight. Because the Parks Commission and the Parks Department can plan into the future. They'll know where the money's coming from for that next project. And the city will benefit, the residents will benefit, the City Walk residents will benefit. And so I'm very grateful for the work that Jerry, you and your team with Alex and Joe, Martin and Debbie, I can only imagine how many dozens of meetings you guys had before you. This is probably part of your weekly schedule, I suspect, for many, many months. And I'm grateful for the work that you guys put into this. It's going to help us all. And I'm very grateful for all of you that worked on it. So thank you.
Sabina.
Hi, thank you for the presentation, Jerry and Alex both. Really clarified a lot of things. I've been watching the Parks Commission meetings on YouTube, the Planning Commission meetings on YouTube. People generally watch Netflix at night. That's what I watch at night. And it has, the development agreement has evolved over those meetings. You've taken input, feedback, and really integrated that. And so I really appreciate some of the things you've been able to bring to council today. I've also tried my best to read the 850 page development agreement. I would not claim that I read every page, every single thing. But I did try to kind of at least pick out the things which I thought would be important to talk about. And I did read up on development agreements and how beneficial they are actually to both parties, both for you to have that certainty over the years. This is a long-term agreement, and both for us to be able to get the community benefits out of it. So I'm very excited, especially with the Pulpos concept, Alex. I think, it's a great benefit that will come to San Ramon, and I'm excited to see in my lifetime if I'm able to walk some of those parks. There were a couple of things I thought I wanted to raise. One is that, we are agreeing that this could go into, into 2 10-year extensions. And I understand, with how things are, we've seen that with City Center. I remember when I moved here, it was supposed to come in maybe 10 years to 2012 or something like that. Conditions changed and City Center came much later, and the concept completely evolved. And, we have a beautiful City Center. We have a really, amazing downtown now to look forward to. And it's not the same concept that was there maybe 10 to 20 years or 12 years ago even. And so one of the things which I was thinking about is that as we look at these evolving conditions, would it be beneficial to both Sunset Development and the city to have an oversight committee which could meet on a regular basis year over year? And, it could be made up of a council member, possibly somebody from planning, somebody from Parks Commission, Planning Commission, staff, and maybe our EDAC as well. Again, I'm not laying out the specifics. What I think is that we make sure that we are going through and implementing all of this. My concern was, it may never happen, but my concern was that in 20 years, 30 years from now, we're still developing this project, and your family does not want to be involved in development anymore. And so this is going to be, the development agreement is going to be what is a piece of paper that if somebody else was to, and I'm, hypothetically thinking about it, but thinking about 30 years from now, was to take over this development project from you, was to implement it, this agreement is all we have to stand on. And so how do we make sure, right, that this development agreement is tight enough. There's no loose ends that anybody could poke holes into. And I think having an oversight committee would kind of make sure, instead of you going back to planning again, everything, make sure that whatever you're bringing in front of council is something that we've already agreed upon. We've checked off on the development agreement, on the project plan and how it's rolled out. So that was one suggestion. Again, a recommendation, which I think would be mutually beneficial to both of us. The other thing which I was looking at is a climate action plan. I know we're following the 2011 cities climate action plan, and we are following some of the state stuff. Things are changing very rapidly in California. The governor just announced that 2035 we will be carbon free cars and everything. So I want to make sure that we are taking into account the climate action plan. We are spelling out some of those, and if Debbie, those are already in there, please do point me out. Point those out to me because I wasn't able to find too many specifics. So those were a couple of things which I had kind of picked up on and wanted to bring up to your attention.
Thank you, Sabina. On this second sort of iteration, I'd like to get an opportunity to share and get the rest of the council's feeling about a couple of things to look at for the contract. One would be, I would like that the city would have the option that if we wanted to make improvements to the woodlot or to Henry Ranch in advance, that we could do so at our cost. And when the dollars would come due on the contract, so it wouldn't cost Sunset any additional dollars, that when the dollars would be due to us, they would reimburse us. But I think we don't have to do it, but I think it'd be important if the city had the option and not wait 20 years for Henry Ranch or perhaps wait 8 years for the woodlot, that we could go ahead and do those parks and then get reimbursed at a later on date. Just have that language. Doesn't mean that we have to do it, just that we have the flexibility for a future council if they may want to do it. So something to think about. The other is on inclusionary housing. I know this is brought up in the Planning Commission. I think the language is fairly clear, but we want to make sure that it's very clear in the language that all 675 units of inclusionary housing will be built on the site. Now, as long as that's in the contract and it's clear that all 675 are built on the site, I think that's good, clear language. We need to have it in there. I was going to bring up that every year that the COLA be implemented on the park fees and all the other fees, and that's been addressed. Thank you. That's a great thing to do. I really appreciate that. The other item was the amphitheater. It's scheduled to be done back in 2048 or something, a ways out. It's a $750 contribution to us if it's not done then. That'd be indexed, so who knows what 750,000 will be worth in dollars in 2048. I'd like to consider that we ask that be more front loaded. We already have an amphitheater. I'd rather have those monies go to our current amphitheater than create a competing amphitheater with tax dollars, city funded tax dollars for an amphitheater on the lake. I'd rather have it used currently. So something for the council to consider doing. The only other thing I have a concern on is the pathways on Bishop Drive. And the pathways on Bishop Drive, and I've walked it and I've measured it, and staff's been out there, which I really appreciate Debbie and Joe walking out there with me. There isn't space. There's two things about Bishop Drive. There isn't space for a 60-foot width parkway from Executive Parkway all the way around over to almost City Center. In places, it's fairly narrow. If you go 60 feet, you're well within many places the actual walking path that's along the lake. And so in my mind, that if we were allocating public dollars, would we build this long parkway where right next to it is already a very nice pathway along the lake? So it seems redundant because we have a beautiful pathway that people will take and not spend city dollars on Bishop drive where there isn't space for really a 60-foot wide pathway. I know that's sort of a wrinkle here, that's a big wrinkle, but the reality is we already have a great walking path along the lake. And who would avoid and not use the lake and go on that pathway? And I'd rather have that money reallocated somewhere else within the walking district and have them build a pathway somewhere else that is more robust and be more useful, or just have it fall as a credit to the bottom line for us. So I'd like to get my council members' opinion on each of those items. Those are things I would like to see modified in this agreement. Scott.
I've stated this a couple of times that the amphitheater proposed on the lake, while in isolation, it looks like a pretty nice idea. But unfortunately, it's not isolated from Interstate 680. And I've went over there and I stood at where that amphitheater is kind of where it's likely to be, there at the edge of the lake. And the traffic noise associated with I-680 is overwhelming. And you're not going to be able to put a sound wall there because the people on the opposite side of I-680 from that will absolutely scream bloody murder, because sound walls, they bounce in both directions. And so while it might protect the amphitheater, it will ruin the people across the way. And so I'm not a big fan of that amphitheater. And so I'm not, Bill says it's scheduled near the end of the program. I'd like a decision point much earlier on that. And honestly, I can see the opportunity to spend, I don't know, half that, or I'm not a good estimator, but to put a shell, lighting, sound, terraces at our existing amphitheater could improve it so that it would serve our citizens and the City Walk residents even better. So I would like an earlier decision point on the amphitheater. and personally, I would prefer that we not introduce an amphitheater at the lake. The lake is going to have some really nice amenities, and just walking around it is a pretty nice amenity. But the boat dock, the rowboats, the sailing opportunity, the community center over there, its boat dock, those are some pretty nice amenities for that. And if I were a resident of the adjacent units, I'm not sure I would want an amphitheater 100 yards away. That might make living in those units that that face the lake less desirable because of the presence of an amphitheater that's going to be disruptive, because quiet presentations there of Macbeth or something aren't going to play well in the noise. You're going to have a death metal band playing at their loudest in order to be heard. So that's my thought on the amphitheater. I like Bill's comment on the pathway. Where it fits, it fits. Where it doesn't fit, it needs to be adjusted. But I agree that having the lakeside walking duplicated by a street side walking isn't always the best option. And so places where it gets a little narrow, you might look at making an adjustment there. And if that means there's some acreage adjustments, then it could, like Bill said, it could either be used elsewhere or it could fall to the bottom line. We've had the Dougherty Valley Oversight Committee that's gone on now for almost 30 years. At one time we met quarterly, right, Dave? Wasn't it quarterly? And then it kind of, as things slowed down, it went down to an annual reports of, like LOS and things like that, the levels of service and what was happening in various parts of the project. But Sabina's thought of having a a group that is dedicated to meeting with the Sunset Development team and say, okay, where are we now? What's going to happen in the next quarter, or what's going to happen in the next 6 months? And what do you need from the city? And are there any decisions that need to be made? How are we doing on various elements and the timelines associated with it? So Sabine, I give you credit for that. I think that's a good idea. And maybe it's made up of a planning commissioner, a parks commissioner, an ARB, somebody from the Architectural Review Board, and a council member. Meet as needed, but not less than annually. I think is a good idea. I hope that I don't see that as too great a burden on either our staff or hopefully on Sunset staff to come and talk about things. They can decide what their charter is and what elements they want to talk about. But I think it's a good idea.
I agree, Scott. I agree.
If I could just chime in on that particular point, there is an annual review section in the municipal code that requires that the planning director review the agreement every 12 months. The purpose to inquire into the good faith compliance of the applicant with the terms and conditions of the agreement, and for any other purpose that's specified within the agreement. That annual review could include consultation with whoever she's directed to consult with. But generally, it's that if the planning director finds that there's some lack in good faith compliance, she would then be able to refer the matter to the planning commission, and from there the council.
I'm not so much concerned about failure to comply, but making sure that there are people on the various levels of our elected and appointed government that get updated and briefed on what is the progress and what is the near future and what problems and things we have. But I would hope that Debbie would see fit that meeting could be held with a group of elected and appointed officials.
To your point, Scott, it would really increase communication and transparency on what's going on. Sabina, I think that's a really good idea. But Dave had his hand raised for next.
That's because Dave thinks it's a terrible idea. No, Doherty Valley was a settlement agreement. Danville sued the developers. And this DVOC right now, to me, is the craziest thing. I wish we didn't have it. I think they have this right. You have the planning department reviewing this thing, and if it needs to come to us, fine. But this is going to be a very fluid agreement. When an opportunity arises, you go after it. I don't agree with your amphitheater. We had a museum set up for $3 million with Bishop Ranch for, gosh, it seemed like 30 years, but the whole thing's only been 25. I believe it was 95 we made the settlement. But that was all tied to Doherty Valley was a lawsuit. The deal with Bishop Ranch was more of an agreement like this. And when things come along and you could move it, you moved money around. I mean, this whole city center is probably part of it, or maybe where, well, you guys aren't here, where City Hall is. I think we're trying to make too much out of it. There are some things in here you brought up. You want to deal with an addendum, fine. If you look at something where you go around and say, okay, now in the light of day, we see that this road doesn't make as much sense. I personally prefer the one on the outside, but I'm off from both of you so much right now, it's ridiculous. The climate action thing, we have agreed, or we have been a part of a pledge, and I know Sabina, you and I in particular, of diesel-free in 33. We're part of it. That's what the Bay Area Air Quality Management District is doing. Now, if we want to get into something where we're going to ask Bishop Ranch, where are they on the climate action plan? Are we dealing with stationary or are we dealing with mobile? One's the air district, one's the air board. But I believe our diesel free in 33, which is a program I actually sent the follow-up, I believe, to Joe in an email. There's so much, we're never seeing each other anymore. I don't know, but this is still active. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's all there. My personal feeling, and I did read this agreement, that it is exactly what we want to do. Now you follow up on the tweaking that I think I heard, if you want to do it, in an addendum. But I don't want to start another one of these DVOC things where 15, 20 years down the road, you're trying to, well, the agreement says this, you can't do it. That was more for intersections, level of service. We don't even have that anymore in part of CEQA. So going back through the zoning administrator or the community development director, to me, is the way to go. And I think you wrote it up right the first time.
Can I also add one other thing? There is an annual review section in the development agreements themselves. And that annual review requires the developer to provide a letter stating how he's been in compliance, demonstrating good faith compliance with the terms of the development agreement. And staff would then essentially have the option of presenting that to the council on an annual basis as well.
So I think this is the idea of oversight committee. Maybe you were overcomplicating this. My goal is to continue to have a partnership, which is beneficial to both Sunset and us, where we continue to see that if something happens, things change and it needs to be pushed out another 10 years. How do we push it out? How do we work together? This is a very big project for San Ramon. Like you were talking about building a whole brand new town, if you will, the way I see it. It's not the suburban town we live in. It's almost a suburban urban part of town that we're creating and building here. And what my thought is that we work on this together. We have the plan. It could change. Like I said, city center completely changed from what was going to be retail and housing bunched up together. Maybe there is going to be a need. And how do we talk through that and then bring it to a review process and say, okay, this is what we need to modify. This is a 27-year agreement with, like we said, it's what's written in the agreement, at least my understanding is that it can be extended twice at the request of Sunset, or any other development who may just, who knows, 37 years from now, what happens, right? So my goal is, how do we continue to make sure that we're working together on this? Tomorrow, I'm not there, Alex is not there, somebody else is there, but at least whoever's elected or whoever's appointed is, looking out for the best interests of the.
Yeah.
Our
Discussion. Go ahead, Phil.
I'm inclined, first of all, as somebody who works in an organization that just loves to create committees, I'm impressed by Sunset folks' ability to keep a straight face about some of this stuff. My view is that whoever the council is can delegate what the responsibilities are to whomever. And the oversight will come as a natural part of the agreement. It doesn't need to be codified in there that you'll meet and confer on an annual basis with an EDAC representative and all that. I think the spirit of what you're describing, Sabina, to me is just, keeping that sort of thing, if it is an agreement, really is the spirit of something. It doesn't have to be the letter. If you're having to go in and say, oh, wait a minute, it says here on page 238 that we're supposed to do this, you've lost sight of some of this. So I'm more inclined to delegate and hear back. And you're right, it is a big deal, but I don't know as it has to be so prescribed as far as who's meeting and conferring. Right now, it's essentially the city manager's designee, right? The community development director. I mean, that's remember that was something that got pulled away from the previous person on something else and sat with the city manager because council wasn't happy about some things that were happening. So that flexibility remains with the city manager. I like Bill's idea of if the city wants to front some things as it relates to the parks, I think that's, you know, some sort of crediting thing like that makes sense. I mean, that DVOC thing's useless, right? It's a complete waste of time at this point. It frankly gives Danville some sense that they have some power over what goes on in San Ramon that they shouldn't have at all. And but as Dave said, it's a byproduct of litigation, not cooperation. This is a byproduct of cooperation, and I think it will sort itself out as far as how things get reported out without having to prescribe it at the front end. So I like that if there's a way of flexibility on the city fronting something that they'd like to do earlier. That makes sense to me. And just one other thing, the extensions, I believe we extended some parts of the Chevron development agreement at some point or another. It's not that it's not that unusual. I mean, who knows what 25 years from now is going to look like. So there's a natural build of that into these things, and I think that there's the spirit of cooperation is here. A couple of the things that the thing Bill suggested about, and like, look, you can figure out that amphitheater some other time. I don't want to be designing that tonight. And so those are my three pieces. I'm not big on the, if there's oversight or reporting back, we can figure that somebody else can figure that out who's on the council in the future. Flexibility on if the city wants to step in earlier, I think is a good idea. And so those are my points. I'm about ready to adopt this thing myself.
My thought is that I think Debbie wants to speak, so go right ahead, Debbie.
I just want to remind the council that while the commission took an action to approve the master plan for 4,500 units, there are still a number of applications that require planning commission approval and architecture review board approval and parks commission input. So because we've given that approval in September, doesn't mean they're not coming back through the process. So in a way, there's also a natural checks and balance already brought in addition to how we want to treat and have the annual review conducted. So
great.
Have a public speaker, Bill.
It sounds to me that we have a consensus that we want to move forward and approve this agreement, but there might be a few things we want to tweak. Dave uses the word addendum, but we could talk about some things we'd want to tweak. And I've tried to make some notes, so if I've missed something, let me know. But is there anybody here that thinks we're going in the wrong direction? No, we're going in the right direction, absolutely, okay. In order of, not necessarily, maybe my order, you guys can, first was, how we feel about having the flexibility as a city, if we want to build something in advance, get reimbursed later on, they can work out the mechanics, but we want that kind of language. Anybody object to that?
No.
No.
But that sounds okay. Another was the fact that the inclusionary housing should have the word shall. I think the shall is in there, but all 675 units should be built on that site. I think, anybody disagreement with that?
When you say on that site, there's actually
in the project
5 sites.
Yeah, there are 5 sites, somewhere in the 5 sites.
But within the master plan designated area.
Absolutely, yes. They talked about having the COLA every year. That was a change. So every year the COLA for both the park fees and the offsite. That's great. I really appreciate you guys doing that. Opening up the lake early. It sounds like they're going to do that early. That's fantastic. The things that might require some more discussion, it sounds like to me that the amphitheater is not a big deal, but it's 27, 28 years in the future. We have an amphitheater already. I would like some direction if you guys feel strongly that we want that money sooner if possible. and have it go to our current amphitheater to have it done.
I disagree. So you
Okay,
guys,
that's
what
what,
you want. I just disagree.
okay, so Dave is like, no, Scott's like, maybe yes.
I don't have very strong feelings about it, so.
Yeah, I think we'd leave it alone myself.
Okay, I'm not really strong on it, but I just want to make sure we do
I mean,
our
it
due
may be a
diligence.
good idea. It's just like, okay, the park says it, Parks Commission says it's a good idea, and then we move towards it.
Okay, now, that
Don't stand
750
on-
credit needs to be indexed today, so every year that goes up by the COLA. Is that objection anybody's part?
That's good.
That's,
Go stand on Bishop Drive by that location at 7 o'clock at night.
They can work, I don't disagree, Scott, but I guess another council is going to work this out.
I will just tell you that we had a museum, which for the life of me, when it got it towards the end of the line on it, I couldn't figure out why we were doing it. The same thing may happen with this amphitheater, and it's been given a value. That's what I'm getting at. Decide when something comes along you really want to do. To try and design that, no, tonight we're going to put it in another amphitheater is not the way to do it.
No, I understand. Just want to get a feel.
what I agree with is that, and I think that's already been addressed, that it has the COLA value associated
Yeah,
with 34,
exactly.
30 years later, they don't want to build it. We get money in those dollars. That's-
Okay. The oversight, I hate to use the word oversight perhaps, but I think of it as more of a communications. Sabina's idea that at least maybe once a year, along with Debbie's position, bringing together some key people and doing a report out to residents. Keep in mind, Dave, you and I were on DVAC, and if it wasn't for our involvement in DVAC, that community college library would not have been built. So there's some
I'm
things
going to
that
make
came
it
out of.
easy for you, Mayor. I have somebody in mind that I am going to put on this oversight committee, and she will read all 800 pages, and she will be the expert on this oversight committee. And I'll let you pick two other people. I mean, I'll let that person pick two other people.
General thoughts, thumbs up, thumbs down, and having thoughts of some language about an oversight.
My personal feeling is this next commission is going to discuss this and whether or not they want to do it. Because we did one to begin with. Scott was on it. Scott and Abram were on this thing. And maybe once Sabina hears other things that were done, she'll come up and coalesce what her idea was, because it was her idea.
I'm going to ask Martin a
I'd
question.
not call it oversight. I'd call it some sort of meet and confer with designees.
Yeah. Martin, is the language in the current agreement without modification give the city manager and the council flexibility to have that meet and confer, thank you, Phil, ability? Martin, you're on mute.
Yes. Yeah, I believe it does. There's the section 13 that requires the developer to submit a letter demonstrating compliance. It doesn't say who has oversight, but I would, the way I would envision it is that the letter would come into staff, and staff would then, based on that and their own observations and their own review, they would have the flexibility to bring that to council or to the planning commission for their review and comment. They could do that as just an information item, and then take direction from whichever hearing body.
Sabina, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily mean it to be a compliance or a, if oversight is too strong a word. My goal was working together on this so that, whatever things we need to iron out, they could be ironed out by a mutual communication of some parties, that whatever we decide on, right? I'm not describing what it should look like. My goal is to have a very, work together on this as we roll this out, and make sure that, the residents, like Bill said, and the city council is updated on how it goes on. And we do that with all the different, we do it with our transportation, we do it with MCE, we do it with, all these other agencies that we liaison with. And I think it's, for me, that's the, like, Phil put it, it's the spirit of how we work together.
Yeah. And you guys got to admit, this is going to be an amazing project as it evolves. It is just going to be, it's going to be something that people from all over the Bay Area, all over the state are going to come and see. How did you guys work this out? How were you able to make this come together the way you have? And so communication will be really important. The last item we have is the Bishop Ranch or the Bishop Drives pathway. And the specifications on the project is that it'll be a 60-foot wide pathway. I would like to have that looked at because I've walked it. There isn't room for a 60-foot wide pathway from Executive all the way over to City Center. It encroaches well into the lake. In fact, it passes over the lake pathway by 10 feet in places. I think we need to have that resolved and come to an understanding that either there's no pathway or we compromise it, it just gets smaller in length, or there's a credit. I need to hear some feedback for you guys on how you want to approach. To me, this is a big item because if we're going to spend city funds, these are city funds we're spending for a parkway. We want a redundant parkway and we want one that's not 60 feet.
Well, if it actually extends past the lakeside pathway, then it's got to be encroaching into the lake then at some point. And therefore you can't count it that way. So somebody has to draw it out, and actually see what it should be. And if there's a credit there, there's a credit there.
I thought I read something in the report that said if we're not able to build a pathway that size, then we will negotiate the credit. I thought that language was in the.
There is language in there on receiving credits for unbuilt or adjustments to parcel sizes. There is language in there.
I think Debbie wants to talk.
Yeah.
Debbie, thank you, Phil.
Oh, yes. As in my presentation, I mentioned that section 9.2, which talks about if we get down to design a park and we're apparently all the acreage cannot be accommodated for some reason, and we're short, then the remedy is that the city is paid that acreage in fee. So there is a mechanism in place. So if for some reason we get down, as we saw in Sunset's presentation, based on the current layout, the walking district or the parkway and the lake park do not overlap right now. But it's a large scale master plan. There's fine tuning to do, but it may potential. We just don't know. So as Commissioner Perkins.
Yeah, and I think I think that makes sense. There's a mechanism for it. And I personally like the idea of having more than one pathway. I don't need to go the same way every time. And there may be more people using it as a bike near the road and pedestrians closer to the lake. So having a couple of options and the flexibility to do that sort of when it gets right down to it, what are you talking about? They have a mechanism for providing credit if need be or some other mechanism. So I think that's already been, it sounds like it's already been sorted out.
I think you're right, Phil. Thank you. Any disagreement on that?
No, just a reminder, you have a speaker.
Oh, somebody else wants to speak?
Well, we already had public comment.
We had public comment and closed public comment, Dave.
Yeah.
May have had his hand up all that time.
No, the hand went up after we closed public comment.
Okay.
And we want to be consistent about how we do it from meeting to meeting. The new mayor can do it differently, but I want to be consistent that if you do it once, you got to make the exception every time. So you cannot make exceptions and not do exceptions. Otherwise, you tell somebody else at another meeting, sorry, you're not important. We're not going to recognize you after the fact when you lend it to somebody else. So
I'll second Phil's motion.
All right. So to repeat what I think I've heard, and tell me if I'm wrong, folks, we are going to proceed and go. There is no change in the language on the amphitheater except make sure the COLA is involved. The inclusionary housing language will be there. That their language about if the city wants to build in advance, we can do that. That there'll be a clear, as things get built, if we find that pathways aren't exactly what they're going to be, there's a mechanism in place now to take care of that. and that we've handled the thoughts about how we're going to handle oversight. Is there anything else we're missing on how you'd want to proceed with this?
If not, we'll figure it out when it comes up.
Because we get this coming to us again in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, having said all this, Joe, you sat on the negotiating team along with Debbie. Is the language or the stuff we brought up, any questions about how you want to add any language or modifications to this?
Well, certainly what the modifications would have to be agreed to by Sunset. I would like to point out on the off-site park builds that the thought process behind that negotiation was that Sunset could build those parks through economy of scale and get way more value for the dollar than we would. So that could be a negotiated item if Sunset was open to that. But just like City Hall, we would not be able to build City Hall for the price that Sunset built City Hall. So the whole idea behind it was that we would not be able to build our parks for the price for what Sunset could build our parks for. So therefore, that dollar that's inserted in the development agreement, if you believe that's the case, will go a lot longer, a lot farther with Sunset doing it rather than the city being reimbursed for some item or a park that we built.
Understood, and maybe you pay Bishop Ranch the dollars early for them to do it early. So it's up to you guys. Just have the flexibility. That'd be nice if the flexibility was there. But I get it, Joe. Okay.
Mayor, if I may also chime in, section 5.4 under project changes do allow project changes. So there might be some flexibility in that section that will allow those parks to test earlier.
Debbie, you have an echo going on.
Sorry.
I think so. But we understood what you said. Okay, not seeing any more comments. Does somebody want to make a motion to have this go to next meeting?
I'll move the introduction. Go to Phil, you got it? You want to go? Jerry wants to speak? Joe wants to speak? What am I doing?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to point out these are changes to what has been presented at the development agreement. So I believe we have to have Sunset weigh in on this.
Well, I assume that you guys would talk about this after the meeting and meet and confer.
We most certainly could meet and confer.
But then it's got to come back and
buy-in now. Then
yeah.
Oh,
Got to
okay.
come back anyway.
Okay, understood.
Yeah, either way.
So open it up to Alex and to Jerry for thoughts.
Thank you. I would like to address a couple of things. I think the goal here is to try to reach an agreement tonight so that you can take a vote. And then the next time it comes back is just for adoption of the ordinance. So that's one thing. So I'm going to take a stab at most of these and then Alex can proverbially kick me in the video if he wants to make a couple of changes. But it seems to me that to the extent you want the flexibility to build the parks early and you want us to build it and you fund it, and then we'll reimburse you our portion at the time, seems easy enough to do. I believe you can check with the city attorney, but I believe that the issue about building the inclusionary housing within the master plan was brought up at the commission, and we made changes to the development agreement to ensure that was the case. So I believe if Mark can confer that, I believe we have that language in the development agreement. Great.
Good.
As it relates to the pathways, the amount of acreage do not overlap. There are a couple of areas that get very tight, but there are a lot of areas that are wide. And so we do think that we'll be able to average out and get enough acreage around there and get enough walk path that it will be a beautiful walk path, and we'll be able to, balance that all out. Let's see, as to the, meet and confer, I think as Councilman Hudson and Elaine had pointed out, and I think Martin pointed out, I believe that there isn't really any necessary changes to the development agreement language to allow that to occur. Because I think the city could either give the power through the city manager and through Debbie to do that, or you could say, we want you to assemble a committee to do your annual review. So I don't think it requires a change to the development agreement to accommodate whatever kind of meet and confer you want to do with that. I want to clarify a couple other things. The escalation that I brought up, so I think there's a little confusion here, is aligning the Exhibit I with the development agreement language as it relates to the way that the escalation works for the park impact fees, which is an annual escalation adjusted every 5 years. And so we're just making that change to Exhibit I to make it align. The escalation for the offsite parks were done slightly differently, that they're adjusted 3% every 5 years for escalation as it relates to the building of the offsite parks. We did not contemplate escalating the $750,000 for the amphitheater. So, and remember, when we looked at this agreement, of course, we look at it in whole in the financial costs and benefits to this. So if we push one lever, we got to pull another lever. And so it's up to Alex how he wants to weigh in on that, but that wasn't contemplated in the original framework of the agreement. So I just wanted to make clarifications on those issues. So Alex, did you want to weigh in on any of that?
No, I'm good.
The only thing that I have an issue would be, I think all the fees that we would receive over the years should be indexed to 2020 every year. Because we gave you the upfront $49 million credit, and that monies we proceed going on, if they're not indexed because of net present value, they begin to collapse in value. So the real dollars are not there that we give the impression for the credit.
Bill, that is a ton of money.
So can I add
we don't raise our park fees every year. You know, I mean, when was the last time we raised our park fees?
Every year.
By how much?
We just raised it how much? Almost $1,000. It's over $11,000.
And the year before that, it was 9 and we raised it to 10?
Yeah, now we're up over 11.
So what you're by that measure, then what you're saying, it was $2,000 when we started on the council, and it's now 11,000.
Debbie has the numbers.
I don't even think that's the problem. The problem is there's an agreement that's been negotiated.
Yeah.
And now we're renegotiating it. And I mean,
yeah, I mean, you're playing real estate agent here, Bill.
Not what we should be doing.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point out too that we're not getting $49 million of credit here. We're getting a park credit of $31 million for $120 million worth of costs that we're putting out. So it's cents on the dollar that we're getting, and we're going to be building these parks in the future and having to pay the extra cost to build these parks in the future. You're not writing us a check. You're just giving us a credit for the amount of park fees we would otherwise pay. Mm-hmm. And the park fees that you are going to get is escalated. They're not being, but it's just escalated at 3% annually, but adjusted every 5 years. So you are getting more, that park fee is getting paid to you in an escalated format over time. But our credit stays the same. We don't get any more credit for all the amount of money we're going to spend into the future.
If you got 3 people and you got to go with it, go with it. I got to tell you, one of the problems I have is exactly what we're doing. I know we all want to do what's best, but that's the charge of the city manager and his staff to come up with this agreement. We can say yay, nay, or whatever, tweaking, fine, but starting to do this where we do one thing and we don't know what it's unraveled on the other end. I don't know how long you guys spent negotiating this thing, but I don't want to do it. I mean, if you want to take a chance on it, go ahead. But I mean, I'm ready to do the introductions and do exactly what I talked about. If you want to try and do addendums and clarification and stuff like that, and if both sides can say no, but it's got to be the city manager doing it. We can't do this on Tuesday nights.
I completely agree.
Well, but to Phil's question, Debbie, what are our park fees this year now?
But Bill, it's not a matter of, it's not a matter of that being isolated. It's a matter of a set of things that credits exist in the future, and they got to live with what the costs are.
Right,
And
so we're getting $9 million as an example. Now, maybe
why
I read
did
this wrong.
why did this come up 2 hours ago? That's what I want to know, because that is a big deal. And
Yeah,
it's not something that this has been negotiated by 3 other people. And now we're sitting here as a council trying to negotiate it at the 11th hour. I just don't think that's the way we should be doing this.
In all fairness, Phil, my introduction, I said the net present value of money is critical in this complex financial deal. And this was talked about at both planning commission meetings, so it's not a new subject. Not a new subject. It's been talked about extensively. If you have $9 million, do we wait 5 years and then adjust it up 3%? Or after 5 years, we adjust it up 3% for those 5 years? Because if you get $9 million today and you don't get to make the improvement on the park up at Henry Ranch Park, as one example, in 9 years, in 20 years, your $9 million effectively gives you maybe $5 million of purchasing power. You can't do the park. The money is not there.
But we're also, you're failing to compare it with us doing it.
No,
And that's
just the fact that the $9 million is the ability of them doing it and getting these things done. I just want to be able to have our purchasing power remain the same into the future as it is today. And if we're going to give Joe and staff $9 million to build parks in the future, we need to make sure and tell the residents in good faith, we did our homework and they have $9 million in future dollars to do those parks.
I think it's important to point out that it is adjusted 3% annually, Mayor Clarkson. It's just adjusted every 5 years. So if you, what does that compounded mean? And then the other thing is that if we get into a major recession and something delays us, those fees are still escalating. So it could grow beyond that because they are already set to escalate 3% annually. We just make the adjustment to the fee schedule based on the development agreement every 5 years. So they are going up 3% annually.
Okay, that maybe this confusion on the language and why is it every 5 years gets adjusted? I'm not sure I understand exactly what that mechanism means.
Well, Debbie or Joe or Martin, why don't you explain what you thought it meant?
So if we're talking about the offsite, the 10.4 million, that the offsite park construction, the 10.4, that adjusts 3% every 5 years. There's no annual adjustment tied to that. On the park fee of the 9.4, that adjusts 3% annually, but the adjustment is done so the 5 years of adjustment that accrue from year 1, say to year 5, are then adjusted beginning year 6 or something to that effect. So, but the 3% on the park impact fee is adjusted every year, but the overall fee that's collected is adjusted every 5 years.
Which one only goes 3% after 5 years?
The off-site construction costs. But if you recall from City Manager Joe Gorton's comments, is that Sunset will build those parks at a lower rate than the city will too. So there's a cost saving that goes with Sunset doing the construction of the parks, much like the City Hall construction was.
So from my understanding is that everything is taken care of except what we were talking about, the amphitheater. The amphitheater kind of value remains the same even after 30 or however many years, if you guys decide not to build it.
This is a big deal, you guys, because if we don't adjust every year the offsite park fees to increase, you're going to have a council in 15 or 20 years, they're going to have half as much money, even though Sunset's going to build it, which helps save money. But if it adjusts every year, they'll have the $9 million in today's dollars to work with then and not half that amount.
Maybe what's confusing to me is, are you negotiating a different figure? Are you negotiating a different agreement between Sunset and the city of San Ramon?
Yeah, we're adding it so it happens, adjustment happens every year and not every 5.
I would ask that we pull out the charter and see whose responsibility it is to negotiate agreements.
Well, it's interesting you would say that, Dave, because that means that we have no say at all what comes up in front of us.
No, you can vote yes or no, but changing the numbers when somebody's negotiating means we're negotiating. And that's a problem. This is a problem at night because we just got through saying if you change one thing or another thing, they're going to have to go back in there, and we changed it. Now, if you want to do it, okay, let's take the vote and do it. But I'm not going to negotiate on Tuesday night something that our city manager has been negotiating for, it seems like forever. But I mean, we got to take a step back a minute. Do we really want to start doing that? Because that's not what our charter said. That was the first thing, is contracts and agreements are negotiated by our city manager.
I need to hear from Sabina and Scott.
Yeah, I think the only thing right now which seems is of concern is the amphitheater and what we get paid at the end of that. I would agree with the mayor, and I think that's already been Jerry and team and Debbie, everybody's already put in the cost of living index as far as our parks go, and as far as the fees are paid to us if those are not billed. So, you know, I agree. We want to make sure it's fair to everybody. We can go back to the charter, but like I said, I've been watching the meetings, and I've been, you know, seeing feedback, and I'm, you know, really grateful and thankful that all of that has been integrated. And we're at the, you know, the point of a development agreement is that we all go out happy out of all of this, the city and the developer. And I think, you know, we've already stated this, that basically Sunset and San Ramon has worked well together. We will continue to work well together, but this is a development agreement that we want to make sure that the city council, this is the first time it's come to city council. So I don't know why there's so much anger over why we should not be giving our input or talking about this as a group. I don't know, we've had an opportunity before to do this. The Planning Commission has, the Parks Commission has. So I don't know why the city council cannot give their input during this meeting. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Scott.
The engineer kind of guy I am. If you take 2.5% inflation for 27 years, that will have the value. The value becomes 1/2 of
exactly right.
$50,000.
Yes, Jerry?
Can I offer a compromise that may help all of us?
Sure.
If we agree, can we agree to allow the park impact fees, which you'll use not to fund the parks that we're building, but to use to fund and not to fund the offsite parks that we're building? That fee is meant for you to use any way you choose in other parks outside the parks we're building. We're willing to agree to allow that to adjust every year instead of every 5 years. But if we can leave the rest to remain the same, I think that is a good compromise for both parties. We've already covered the escalation for the parks, the cost of the parks, so that will be covered, and could end up being more if it takes us longer to get there because of a pandemic or a recession. So that clock doesn't stop ticking on us. So we're taking on quite a bit of risk there. So if we allow that escalation to stay at its 3% every 5 years, and we allow the park impact fee, which you will use for other parks, I think that hopefully that works as a good compromise.
So that gives you your COLA bill on the park impact fee, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that 950,000 we're talking about you know, 470,000. That's almost in when I work federal budget things, we call that decimal dust. It starts to become de minimis in terms of the total.
I think we are reaching a consensus here. Do I hear anybody else not agreeing?
With what Jerry,
Yes.
I'm fine with what Jerry just put forward. Dave, do you want to? You've been ready to make a motion.
No, I'll do it. I'll move. Where am I at? Introduce the ordinance, ordinance 1, next in line, adopting City Walk Development Agreement regarding Bishop Ranch Parcel 1A. That's 20-850-1. Ordinance 2, next in line, adopting City Walk Development.
Councilmember Hudson, I apologize, but it would be much easier, much more straightforward if we did 3 ordinances by 3 motions.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah.
10:58 at night, Martin, and I got a 4 a.m. wake up call, and you gonna do. All right, I got one on the motion on the table.
I'll second.
Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded.
And is everyone clear on the change? Is it just the one change on the 3%?
Oh, wait a minute. And at the end of all 3, I'm going to say set the November 24th meeting for adoption.
Yes. And does that motion include
as modified?
As modified by Jerry.
As modified by Jerry. So that's the only modification. Okay.
There's also, oh, you're okay. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Take your time, Debbie. Anything else we should amend on that?
No, it was the previous section that Jerry had mentioned in his presentation. So not a problem. We're good.
Thank you. Moved. It's been seconded. Any discussion?
Aye.
Seeing none. Madam
Aye.
Clerk.
Councilmember Hudson.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Alone.
Aye.
Councilmember Perkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zafar.
Aye.
And Mayor Clarkson.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes 5-0.
Oh, I can waive the reading on that too, right, Martin?
Yes.
All right. And then I'll move the introduction of the ordinance, the second one next in line, adopting City Walk Development Agreement regarding Bishop Ranch Parcel 3A. That's 20-850-2. Waive that reading too.
As modified.
Yeah, that modified thing.
Second.
Seeing no further discussion, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Hudson.
Aye.
Councilmember Alone.
Aye.
Councilmember Perkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zafar.
Aye.
And Mayor Clarkson.
Aye.
Thank you. That passes 5-0.
Okay, and I'll move the introduction of the ordinance next in line, number 3, adopting City Walk Development Agreements regarding Bishop Ranch Parcel 2600, that's 20-850-3, waive the reading and also set the meeting for November 24th for adoption.
I'll second as modified.
Add that thing too.
Seeing no further discussion, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Hudson.
Yeah.
Councilmember Alone.
Aye.
Councilmember Perkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zafar.
Yes.
Mayor Clarkson.
Aye.
Thank you. That passes 5-0.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you. We are blessed to be working with Bishop Ranch on this.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Thank
Madam
you,
Clerk.
members of the council.
I'm
Thank
not
you very much.
unmuting for that comment.
Item 13, city manager comments.
I have a strange feeling this will be the one time you don't want me to have any comments, so therefore I will abide by that, and I have no further comments.
What about Mr. Gordon, sir? What about consideration of cancellation of December 22? Did you want to do that or not?
That's right, it's on the agenda, so we want to cancel Christmas, the second meeting.
Cancel Christmas.
September.
You need a motion for that, Martin?
I'm thinking Phil, and I don't want to let you guys off the hook.
I think you should.
No, that's why I asked if
I think you should meet
while they were
myself.
still on mute.
I object.
I object. I think they should meet.
No, I agree for the third vote. And Bill, you can do the Pledge of Allegiance. And Phil?
It's
Let
all
me know how that goes.
Yeah, right. Hold my breath. Yeah, I move that we cancel the December 22nd meeting.
Second.
See no further discussion, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Hudson?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Alone?
No, I mean, yes.
Councilmember Perkins?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Zafar?
Aye.
And Mayor Clarkson?
No. Well, all right, go ahead.
Thank
Mayor,
you.
I will add,
Passes 5-0.
I do have one update that the swearing in due to the pandemic will be virtual as normal. And we have some, we're trying to make it special for those, you and the council member alone and moving out. And so hopefully we'll be able to do it from a virtual setting. But that will more details on that to come probably in the next.
Joe, for your new council members, it'd be nice if we could later on, especially for Shadar and for the mayor, if they could have another ceremony later on, once the chamber is open. I think it'd be nice to have a gathering and have a reenactment. It's pretty special for Dave to be an elected mayor. You should get that. It's special for Shadar. So to the extent you can have a public thing for them, I think that would be nice.
Yeah, we'll do what we can. We've been racking our brains, honestly, to try and make it special for incoming and outgoing. I think we've accomplished that within the constraints that we have, but we certainly will look for an opportunity when we get to come together.
I don't know.
It works for me.
Already in City Hall all the time, so he could just go stand in that room by himself. You could do that.
Where do you think I
Put it
am?
on Zoom.
I'm in the room by myself.
That's all for me.
Great.
Thanks, Joe.
Item 14, public comment.
Public comment is for anything that's not on the agenda and for anybody who has not yet spoken at public comment. And we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Has anybody raised their hand?
For those in the audience that would like to speak under public comment, please use the raise your hand button at this time.
All right, given about 5 seconds, nobody's raised their hand. We will close public comment. Next item.
Item 15, city council members and mayor's comments.
I'll start with Scott. Move around my screen here.
Okay, two quick things. We had a meeting of the East Bay Regional Communications System Authority Finance Committee. We're moving forward on a number of issues. I won't give details at this late hour. And the second thing is tomorrow is Veterans Day. And I want to wish my other veterans, Dave and Bill, a happy Veterans Day. And I know there's more than a couple of dozen in the city staff that are veterans as well. But it's a great opportunity to, you know, we think back to 11/11/1918 when World War II armistice was signed and we commemorated
World War I.
World War I. Yes, thank you. Was signed in 1918 on
11 o'clock and 11 minutes after.
11 minutes after, that's right. So, and I visited the Verdun battle site. Incredible. Thank you all.
Thank you. Phil.
I just want to congratulate my colleagues and thank you.
Sabina.
All right, wishing you all a happy Veterans Day. Because of you, I get a day off tomorrow. So thank you for your service to our community and to our country. The one thing that I did want to bring up is that the Board of Supervisors, Contra Costa County Supervisors, passed Declaration of Climate Emergency, and that demands accelerated actions on climate crisis and calls on local and regional partners to join together to address climate change. It's a whole, it was passed 5-0 by the supervisors, and I would like to see it come to council if possible for us to adopt it as well.
Dave, you can take as much time as you want because you have an early morning flight, so go right ahead.
It's a drive. It figures John would do something like that. I wonder where he got the wording, but that's my brethren from the Air District that came up with that little beauty. But, you know, there's going to be a lot of them over the next several years, so we'll see where it goes. That's it for me.
I'm okay. Madam Clerk,
Item 16, adjournment.
thank you, everybody. Have a safe day. Those in favor signify by leaving.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well,